Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Tariq Hadi. I've been honored to introduce Nassim Mansurov. I'm from Jordan. He's from the United States, originally from Uzbekistan. Moved to the States good 22 years ago. I met Nassim through his website that's called photographylife.com. It's a very good site that provides serious photography information, whether it's technical, artistic, futuristic about photography, all of these things. Nassim was in Jordan, and he posted something on his website that he wanted to meet someone to take him around, so we met. And after that, we became friends immediately. We've been doing workshops in Jordan annually. We get professional photographers. We take them in tours in Jordan every year, different photographers. This year, we decided to add a short 4-day trial to come to Dubai and then go to Jordan in the hope that we will eventually make a separate trip for Dubai. Nassim is very passionate about photography. He kind of switched from his IT career into photography I think it was 2008 when you, yeah. When Nassim comes to Jordan, he has few things he does next to photography. That's eating mansaf, eating shish kebab, and other things that usually most Westerners don't eat. One thing that has always been part of what made this guy is when he used to live in Uzbekistan, where he comes from, his father, can I say that?
Go ahead.
His father had him sweep the street, him and his brothers, every morning to keep their neighborhood, that part of the town, clean. This is for nothing, no pay. They just have to wake up every morning and sweep the street. I think this part of the character, the building up of the character, made him do things so he's so meticulous about doing things. He looks into details and he follows things until he gets them through or the right way. Today, HIPA, with our thanks, is doing this lecture. It's unlike something you have heard before, because usually HIPA is so generous that they do lectures on photography on almost every aspect that has to do with composition, lighting, special photography, whether it's a wildlife, macro things. But today we will hear something more about the future of the photography, how things are going to evolve, and where we are going into the future. Ola told me that in due time, we would have a 15-minute break for Maghrib prayer. Anybody who wants to take that break. And then this lecture is broadcasted live on your site, on YouTube too, on your channel on YouTube. And what else? That's it. And thank you very much for coming. I leave you with Brother Nassim.
Thank you very much, Brother Tariq. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Nassim. I'm from Uzbekistan, and it looks like Brother Tariq already gave all the background information. So today the topic is kind of interesting. I want to talk about technical photography and what it means in terms of technology and how it's impacting the photography and the camera industry today. So Brother Tariq already told a lot of things. Well, first of all, big thanks for HIPA for inviting me here. But special thanks to Brother Tariq because he's a very special person for me. I call him my teacher. because he's a walking encyclopedia. That's how I define to other people. Really appreciate everything he's done for me, and he helped introduce me to the Middle East. So I'm very, very grateful. Thank you, brother. And as well as all the friends who have become my family now here. So I'm originally from Uzbekistan. Graduated from University of Colorado. That's how I ended up in Colorado. I've been living there for 23 years now. I spent 20 years in information technology. My last job was a vice president of hotel information technology within hotel vertical. So did a lot of projects, but mostly was data centers and a lot of other interesting things. But anyway, that kind of got boring. So for me, I quit my job in 2015. I started photography life a few years before that. And ever since, I've been a full-time photographer and publisher today. I shoot with a variety of different gear. For my current setup is the Nikon Z6, Z7. That's the mirrorless system, and then the Fuji GFX is medium format. That's my primary camera. But I've shot with pretty much every brand out there, every camera system out there, because as part of running website, I have to make sure that I understand about technology, about how things are changing in the industry. So today, obviously, normally I don't do this. This is, for me, it's a very strange presentation because I don't talk about this kind of stuff. It's usually in the articles that I do, but it's going to be my first time presenting on this topic. So if you have any questions at any point of time, please raise your hand and let me know. I want to keep it interactive. And if you start falling asleep, just let me know, okay? All right, so a couple of things. Let's have some fun. Okay, I'm going to try to make this presentation so that you guys can interact. And the way we're going to do it is, in between the slides, when I talk about the technical stuff, I'm going to put some images from the last few years that I've taken. Okay, these are mostly, I would say, last months of my travel worldwide. And what I'd like you to do is, if you have a notepad, pull out a notepad, or if you have your phone, just use your phone. And as I show you the pictures, I'm just going to talk about the picture during that time. Just like note picture number, and then which camera system you think I took it with. So I've got a selection here: Nikon, Canon, Sony, Fuji, or other. So just make some notes. This is fun because I think there's a lot of things that happen between camera systems out there, right? And in fact, before I get started, I'd like to ask some questions. So who's a Nikon shooter today? Can you guys raise your hands? All right, so good bunch. Canon? All right. Sony? 1, 2, really? Wow. Okay, interesting. Fujifilm? We got 2, 3, all right. And something else, maybe Pentax, film shooter. Any film shooters who only shoot film? Only shoot film? No? Okay, but film is a hobby, right? Okay, cool. All right, so I think this is going to be fun, and I'll get started with the first image. So this is my home now. This is Colorado in the fall, and if you guys have a chance to come to Colorado at the end of September, October, you'll get something like this. It's pretty spectacular, and I really, I've traveled all over the world, but I come back to Colorado, and sometimes when people ask me where I'm from, I say, first I say Uzbekistan, then I say United States, then I say, you know what, I'm from planet Earth. Because at the end of the day, I've been to so many places. For me, today, Jordan is like home. I love the country. I've been to Dubai 3 times, so hopefully in the future I'll start calling Dubai home. But I've been to so many places, and in Turkey as well. I've been to lots of places in Turkey. In fact, I went to Turkish high school. So for me, when I'm in Turkey, I also feel home. But anyway, note which camera system you think I took pictures with, and then we'll come back to these images and revisit them at some point. All right, so this is one of my favorite images from last year. In fact, it was 2 years ago. And this is, you guys know, it's the monastery in Jordan, Petra. And a cat was just walking by, and he was asking for food, and we just didn't have anything. I wish I knew that there would be cats so we could feed them. And he realized that there's nothing to ask from these photographers. They have these cameras, but they have no food. So he just sat there and just started glancing at the monastery. It was a very short moment of time that I captured this image with, but it's one of my favorites from that place. It's a brutal hike, though. I don't know if you guys have done that. All right, so let's get into it. I guess the camera industry, okay, and how the camera industry has evolved. So the first thing is let's talk about the casualties of the camera industry and things that have happened over time. So anybody remember panoramic cameras, the film panoramic cameras where you set up and take pictures? Well, those are kind of gone because we have panoramic stitching now. You can just do it with digital. You've got consumer video cameras. I mean, remember back in the day we used to have these things that you would flip the screen and walk around. They still sell them. Nobody buys them, right? But those things are pretty much extinct because every camera now has 4K shooting. So there's really no point of having the separate accessory that you walk with. Tilt shift lenses, I mean, for the most part, if you look at the evolution of the camera industry in the past 5-6 years, we haven't really seen a lot of new introductions of those lenses, just because nowadays a lot of that stuff can be done with techniques like focus stacking and transformation tools. GND filters, you know, the graduated neutral density filters, the ones that you drop in, right? Those things are also going away because of techniques like image blending and luminosity masks. ND filters, those are the ones that are very dark filters that you use to stop the light, right? You can use image averaging techniques where you just take a bunch of images together and then you stack them together and you basically average out whatever you want to do. Whether that's waterfall that you want to take pictures with a really slow shutter speed, or maybe you're photographing a bunch of people and you don't want them in your shots, so you can do those kind of things. UV filters, you know, back in the day, you know, film shooters will know this, right? You have to have a UV filter in front of the film, but nowadays it's part of the filter stack on every digital camera. So that is only needed now for protection purposes if you choose to have one. And then special effects filters, those are all also gone. Warming filters, star filters, color filters, that's all done in software now. Nobody really cares about those things anymore. So there's a few casualties out there. All right, this is another image from Colorado, just aspen leaves on the ground right after it rained. Okay, what else? Remote shutter release, you know. I don't know if you guys, anybody here still uses those? Remote shutter release, we don't really need them anymore because you've got things like self-timer. If you're a Nikon shooter, you know the exposure delay mode, where the camera will actually delay you know, the image for a certain number of seconds before you can take, before the shutter kicks off, and that minimizes the camera shake. Long exposure modes, something called electronic front curtain shutter nowadays on all mirrorless and all DSLR cameras, you'll find that feature. That all, basically the combination of those things, you don't really need the remote shutter release anymore unless you're doing very, very specific things. And dedicated intervalometer, you know, back in the day we would have these tools that would put in, but nowadays, you name it, Canon, Nikon, well, you know, I don't know about Canon for sure, but I know Nikon, Fuji, you know, a bunch of others. Sony used to have this, and then they removed it and they put it back. Now they have intervalometers on pretty much every camera out there. So same thing, tripod stabilization. You know, it used to be a very important thing where you have to have everything stabilized with a tripod. Nowadays, you've got IBIS, in-body image stabilization, right? You know, the image stabilization that's built on the sensor. And you've got optical image stabilization, and sometimes a combination of the two technologies that they can use to stabilize the image. And in many cases, you know, if you're shooting handheld, even in low light situations, you can avoid the tripod use just based on those things. All right, this is actually in Uzbekistan. It's up in the mountains, and I had a lot of fun shooting this one. It's a very detailed image. But again, keep on noting. Remember, I told you if you have a chance to write down which camera system you think I took these pictures with. And this is, anybody been to Death Valley National Park? Yeah? Okay, one person? All right, so Death Valley National Park, this is a place called Zabriskie Point. And in fact, I was going to ask you, anybody here reads photographylife.com? Not really? Okay. I just posted a 32K version of a similar image like this. And 32K, you know, we're talking about 4K, and they're already making TVs now that are 16K. And, you know, now just imagining 32K, that's half a gigapixel image. But anyway, this is called Manly Peak. It's in Death Valley National Park, right after sunrise, which rises from behind. Those layers become they come down on the hills in the back, and they're salt flats on the bottom. It's one of the most beautiful places. I really love the desert, so you'll see a lot of pictures from the desert that I've taken. All right, let's talk about DSLR versus mirrorless, and I think this is something that gets a little bit sensitive, okay? In terms of what camera system you choose to shoot with, some people get really sensitive about this topic because some people really like their DSLRs and they don't want to move to mirrorless. Other people will say, well, mirrorless is the future, move to that. So we'll talk about this and differences in technology. Anybody here shoots DSLR only? Okay, and mirrorless guys? All right, so we have quite a few mirrorless people too here. All right, this is in Switzerland, just high up in the Alps. Just a frozen lake that I've captured. It looks like black and white, but it's not black and white. All right, DSLR camera limitations. So with DSLR cameras, they have inherent limitations to them simply because when the film to digital transition happened, the only component that got switched out was the actual sensor, right? So the film got switched with the sensor. So as a result, there are certain things that have limitations, and size and bulk is one of them. The prism itself, the pentaprism or pentamirror, right? That takes a lot of space, and then also the mirror mechanism that has to be tilted at an angle. Just because of this, the camera has to have a thick profile. So that is a limitation of a DSLR. Weight, obviously, as you increase in size, there's got to be, especially on the higher end models, you're going to have more space, and that adds metal and other components. So as a result, that has to be heavier. Mirror slap is something that you guys already know about. I'm not going to go into detail. This is where the mirror is going up and down, and when it does when the mirror goes up and down, it creates vibration called mirror slap. Also, frame speed limitation. With all the camera systems out there, even the Nikon D6 that just got released, they're pushing 14 frames per second, but that's basically the limit. And at that point, the mirror is coming up and down so much that you are going to start having issues with just basic visibility. So that's also a limitation because of the mirror is coming up and down all the time. It's more expensive to build and support just because of all these different components that have to be inside the DSLR. There's no live preview unless you switch to the live view mode on the back of the camera. And then there's something that a lot of people aren't really aware of. It's called phase detection accuracy. Now, when the image comes through, so you've got the ray of light coming through all that, part of it gets reflected into the pentaprism so that you could see it. But this mirror is also semi-translucent. Translucent meaning part of it is there to let some light through. Part of that light gets into here, and this is another sensor. And that sensor is basically what's called a secondary mirror. So the secondary mirror is right here. It bounces it down into the sensor, and because of that, if there are any issues with the mount or the lens, you start getting into calibration issues. This is where, I don't know if you guys have seen it, you focus with your lens and you take a picture and it looks soft. And you don't know why, but it's because something either in the lens or in the body needs to be calibrated. So nowadays, DSLR manufacturers like Canon and Nikon, they provide options. Nikon specifically has an option where you can calibrate each lens with a body. But it takes time, and a lot of people don't understand how that works. So that gets in the way, unfortunately. So that's another limitation. All right, and this is Colmar in France, just traveling around, taking pictures at night. This is a beautiful place, and there were some birds in the foreground. Other things. Now, in terms of mirrorless camera, right, let's talk about the advantages. We talked about the disadvantages of DSLRs. With a mirrorless camera, you've got a smaller and lighter footprint. And the reason why is because, obviously, there are components. The lens itself is closer to the sensor. And that is the key word here is the flange distance. That's basically from the mount to the sensor, that distance gets reduced. And because of that, just that factor alone results in superior clarity and sharpness for lenses. And you can create lenses that were previously impossible to design on a DSLR camera. Because there's no mirror mechanism, there are less parts, And less noise, obviously. There's no more mirror flapping up and down. There's no mirror slap. And also, there are no FPS limitations. So technically speaking, whatever the limitation of the shutter mechanism itself is, that's what you got to work with. You don't have to worry about the mirror itself going up and down. So you can technically push any frames per second on these cameras that are physically possible. And it's obviously cheaper to build and support because of less components, like I said. Any questions so far? So let's take a look at the DSLR camera versus mirrorless. So I'm just going to go between these two. So as you can see on the DSLR, as the light passes through, bounces through the mirror, goes into pentaprism, and that's what you're looking at. And this is the secondary mirror I was talking about and how it bounces into this phase detection sensor. Now, if we look at the mirrorless camera, you see how much smaller the profile of the camera is? The light comes right into the sensor. There's nothing in between. And then there's another component right here. That's the electronic viewfinder. So now the image is not coming optically, so it's not through the lens. It is through the lens, but it's not bouncing like it was before. It's just being shown on a display here. So that's the main difference between the DSLR and the mirrorless. So this is in New Zealand. Anybody been to New Zealand? All right. North Island, beautiful place. All right. Mirrorless camera advantages. Let's talk about these. So first of all, live exposure preview. This allows you to see things. It's something called what you see is what you can get, right? So you look through and you see exactly what you're about to capture. You've got on-sensor phase detection, which means that the light is no longer having to pass through that secondary phase detection sensor. It goes right onto the sensor, and the sensor itself has the phase detection ability to focus very fast. Something called electronic viewfinder is what I showed in this image right here. So this is the electronic viewfinder. This is what you're seeing through. So you've got things like information overlay, live preview, image review. On a DSLR, for example, if you're taking a picture on a very sunny day, you press the playback button, you're limited to what you're seeing on the LCD of the screen. So, people walk around with those Hoodman loops, where you use your hands to block the light because it's so bright. With the mirrorless, you don't have to worry about that anymore because you can literally just press the playback and look at the image through the viewfinder, so you don't have to think about those kind of basic things. Focus peaking is another feature. This is where you can actually see how the transformation from blur to sharp happens, and it will highlight in a particular color, like white or red color. Up to 100% viewfinder coverage, which means like on a DSLR, you're limited to a very tight space where you move the focus points. On a mirrorless camera, you can technically move the focus point anywhere on the screen, and most of them will have that built in, which means that you don't have to do things like focus and recompose technique. Back in the day where we focus with the center and then we move and recompose, that's something that a lot of photographers have to do with DSLRs just because the center focus point is the most sensitive light. And then, when you focus and recompose, is because if the subject is on the bottom somewhere here, on some part of the frame that you can't reach, then you have to focus and recompose. So you don't need to do that anymore. Better visibility in low light. Basically, because everything is coming through the sensor, you can now boost the output from the sensor. Some cameras at night, like some of the Fujis at night, you can see the Milky Way as you're photographing it on the back of the screen, which is pretty incredible. You can do things like digital zoom through the viewfinder. You're photographing someone and you want to photograph their eyes, right? You want to make sure that their eyes are sharp. You zoom in through the viewfinder and you can get that eye pin sharp without having to worry about focus issues. And no more eye damage, right? You're photographing, if you photograph the sun in the frame, you know how bright it gets and it goes right into your eye. You don't have to worry about it because there's no light passing through the lens right into your eye. This is also in New Zealand. All right, so mirrorless camera advantages. To continue, subject tracking is something that is a big deal nowadays, okay? And this is something that I think in terms of photography, this is changing photography today because you can do things like face and eye tracking, and the focus is so different. And in fact, this is from the latest firmware on the Nikon Z series cameras. You can see now there's face and eyes detection. There's just phase detection, and there's now added animal detection. And you're photographing pets like dogs and cats. it will see which eye is closer to you, and it will automatically track that eye to keep it in focus. And then, so this is a picture of, this is just a live capture from the Nikon Z7 as I was demonstrating the eye focus. Look at that yellow box. And a lot of cameras, the Sony mirrorless system has this now. Nikon has this, Canon implemented with their dual pixel AF, which is also incredible. All of them nowadays, even Fuji has this. It's called face and eye tracking. And as the subject moves, your camera is automatically adjusting to it. You don't have to think about it. Before we used to constantly work and make sure, and when I used to shoot a lot of DSLR, images back then, if you're photographing with a model or a subject, you have to refocus and take so many shots, making sure that one or two of them is going to be sharp. You no longer have to worry about that because these cameras and the automated systems that are built in with the focusing, they automatically keep track of the faces, and you can actually switch. As you can see, there's a little arrow in here which you can set the priority. You just press one button and it moves to this eye, and it automatically does it for you. Nowadays, this can be done with cats and dogs too, and they're probably going to improve this further with like bird photography. Any bird photographers, wildlife photographers? When you do bird photography, you know how difficult it can be to track the subject, just because the bird is small. And these systems, DSLR, you get some information, but this is mostly turned on. You can do a live histogram of the subject that of the image that you're about to take. This way you can avoid all kinds of technical issues. So, with the DSLR, sometimes you get that result when you're taking a picture and it looks fine through the viewfinder. You take a picture and it's really dark or it's super bright, and then you have to readjust your exposure. With mirrorless, you don't really have that problem because you're looking through it. What you see is what you can get. This is just, I don't even remember where this was, but I like to photograph some textures every once in a while. And just really like the positioning of the white rocks against the black ones. All right. EVF lag, clarity, and responsiveness. Now, we're talking about limitations. So these are the things that mirrorless hasn't fully solved yet. Some of them are crossed out, as you can see, because these were very serious limitations to mirrorless that are being resolved or already taken care of. So let's talk about these real quick because this is important, especially if you're considering moving from a DSLR to a mirrorless camera. So the EVF lag, right? Like when you take a mirrorless camera and you look through it, some people will say, it's just not for me. I look at it and I'm not seeing the picture. I see this screen that's catching up. It's called EVF lag. And as you move around, especially in low light situations, you'll notice how it can get laggy, not very responsive. So that's something that manufacturers still need to work on. A lot of them have gotten very, very good already, but it's still something that needs to be worked on. Phase detection, striping, and banding, that can happen because now the phase detection pixels are on the physical sensor. And because of that, they can create some issues. Red dot patterns are like if you look at images made from mirrorless, just because of the way that the lens is so close to the sensor, when the light comes through, it bounces off the sensor, then bounces back to the lens and back to the sensor, and you get all these red dots. So unfortunately, again, these are resolvable issues. If Nikon, for example, has already taken care of a lot of the problems by putting some nice on the sensor itself. That can be an issue. Lack of super telephoto lenses. So anybody who does wildlife photography, you got to need your 400, 500, 600 millimeter, 800 millimeter lenses. Obviously, that's a huge dilemma. So for people who shoot serious sports and wildlife, mirrorless is still a huge limitation from that standpoint. Although Sony nowadays has been pushing a lot of really fast glass. But other things like autofocus speed and accuracy for fast action, that's like it. Right now, mirrorless, especially with cameras like the Sony A9, I don't know if you guys heard of that one, it's so fast that it can challenge a lot of DSLRs, including the Canon 1DX Mark III that just got announced, the Nikon D6. They're just getting really incredible. And strong EVF contrast is also obviously a limitation that has been taken care of. Back in the day, the EVFs were not very high resolution screens, so that was a problem. But nowadays, most of the EVFs are actually really amazing. Poor battery life is also something that got addressed for the most part. So nowadays, you know, Fuji just announced a new Fujifilm X-T4, and now that has a bigger battery. So Sony has done that. A lot of other manufacturers are switching to bigger batteries, so just so that they can have more battery life. And then continuous autofocus tracking and subject tracking. I already showed you some of the pictures, right? And some of the images of how the focus tracking works with the eye detection. All these things are getting so much better now that it's almost on a level that's way above DSLR now. Okay, this is also Death Valley National Park called Mesquite Sand Dunes. Really beautiful, serene area. If you guys ever have a chance to go and travel there. I lead workshops there, so like I said, I really like the desert. And this is actually from this year in January, so just about a month ago. Okay, so why mirrorless will prevail? And I know, like I said, it can get sensitive for those people who really want to stick with their DSLRs, but technology always wins, okay? And it doesn't matter how you look at things today. 10 years from now, I can guarantee you that mirrorless is going to prevail, and for the main reason because it has the technological side. Do so many different advanced things that you cannot do with DSLRs. It's lighter, it's smaller, it's faster. Look at the, you know, we'll talk about the smartphone and other things, but anything that's lighter, smaller, faster is just going to win in the long term. That's just the way it is. Lens redesigns. Every lens, you know, you look at Canon, you look at Nikon, all the latest systems that they've made, the lenses have been sharper, better. You know, if you look at Canon RF, for example, the new system by Canon, their lenses, anybody shot with a 50mm Canon EF 1.2 before? Or an 85mm 1.2? Those are like the exotic Canon lenses. They've reintroduced those lenses for the RF mount, for the mirrorless mount. And those are just absolutely incredible. At 1.2, you're getting a sharp image, something you could never do previously on a Canon EF system, just because you always have to stop down. So that's really no longer a concern because now they're redesigning every single lens. And it's important, especially for resolution. I recently wrote an article on Photography Life that got a lot of people upset. And the title of the article was, Nikon should make cameras that have resolution more than 36 megapixels. And people were like, who are you to say that? You know, why can't we have 60 megapixels? The problem is, as you push more megapixels, you have to have the whole system be able to support it. And lenses are a big part of it. Anybody here uses Sigma Art Series lenses? Okay, so we've got a few people. If you look at the Sigma glass, right, it's all much heavier, much bigger than their Canon Nikon equivalents. And the reason why is because they're putting so many different corrective elements in there. Those lenses are specifically made for higher resolution sensors. So they're able to resolve the detail. Now, if you have a really old lens that somebody gave you, or maybe you bought it from a used market, and that's a 20-year-old lens, you cannot expect that lens to perform very well on a high-resolution camera today. And the reason why is because it's just not made for that. It's made for film, in fact. The corners aren't going to be blurry. Even in the center, you're not going to be able to resolve much detail. And as we are working, as manufacturers are creating higher and higher megapixel cameras, you got to ask yourself, well, wait a second, where is the stopping point? Because in many cases, lenses are simply not there to be able to resolve that detail. You would think that the camera is the one that has the high resolution, but the lens itself also has something called resolving power, right? If you take your glasses, if anybody here wears glasses, sometimes your glasses are not clean, and you look through them and it looks soft, right? The reason why it happens is because your glasses are dirty. Well, same thing with lenses, except some lenses are not designed initially to yield a lot of high resolution. So that's why you have manufacturers like Sigma, Tamron, and others who are now addressing this gap because the manufacturers themselves cannot release lenses fast enough. So with the mirrorless, they realized, you know what, this is our chance. This is our chance. So Canon said that. Nikon said that. Nikon went for a massive Z mount because the F mount was much smaller. And everyone is going now with lens redesigns. And if you look at all the new lenses that they're releasing, they're actually specifically made for the purpose of being able to resolve way more than 36 or 45 megapixel sensors that we we have today. So larger throw diameter, more design choices. F095. Nikon made a lens. It's a Nikon Noct Nikkor 58mm lens. It's a beast, it's a tank, but they did it to showcase that, look, we designed this new system that can actually do that. Before, you would not be able to do a lens like that. In fact, Nikon for many years couldn't even make a 50mm 1.2 or an 85mm 1.2 for that reason. F-mount itself, the flange distance was too long, the mount diameter was too small, and they couldn't accommodate it. That's why Canon has been rocking the boat with the 50 and the 85, looking at Nikon thinking, hey, when are you going to be able to do this? But Nikon physically couldn't. The mount limitation was the throw diameter. So in this case, they all went for a larger mount for that reason, because it gives more opportunities for them to be able to design new lenses. And then also being closer to image sensor means that now the light that comes through, it has a very short travel distance. So you can, inherently, the lenses themselves are going to be able to resolve more detail. That itself creates sharper images because now there's less gap in between. And also the ability to create potentially smaller and lighter lenses just because, you know, of these design limitations that they had before. But unfortunately, there's also demand for sharper optics. You know, we as photographers, we're so stuck up on some things like sharpness, right? We want, oh, that lens is so sharp, you should get that lens. And we've been saying this, and it's like a disease. It's spreading, and the manufacturers know this, so they're creating now sharper lenses. But sharper lenses also mean more corrective elements. So now if you look at the modern lens designs, you went, you know, 5, 6 elements to some of the lenses have 18, 24 lens elements inside in so many different groups. They're so complicated because now there's so much glass to be able to make the image sharper. Look at the design considerations for 2 different lenses. This is a Nikon 1424 f2.8. Now look at the size of that bulbous element. That's a huge element, and as the light passes through, look at how many other elements, right? Just the front part of it has a huge number of elements that are very heavy. This is the new Nikon Z1430. By the way, I have one with me if you guys want to take a look at it, but they couldn't have done this design with the F-mount. This lens is like 3 times lighter, twice smaller than the 1424. In fact, the ratio of these images is not what it should be. It's much bigger. The 1424 is a much bigger lens compared to the 1430. And now they can do something called retractable design, where the lens becomes very small until you open it up, and then you can start shooting. But this is a much simplified, lighter design compared to that. So that's a big difference between the 2 different lenses. Now, obviously, you know, somebody might say, but that's a 2.8 lens. This is an f4 lens. True. But even if they redesign, which they're going to redesign the new 1424 and 2.8, it's still not going to be like this. So Nikon engineers talked about how this you can even put a filter on, something you could never do on lenses like the 1424. So it's a very flexible mount design because of that. This is Uzbekistan and you know, the Aral Sea. I was there earlier last year, and I'll talk about Uzbekistan later. If we have enough time, I have some images from Uzbekistan I'd like to show you guys. The Aral Sea has dried up. It used to run all the way to the shore here. You can't even see it in this image. And I'll show you guys later where the sea is right now. It's a really devastating effect to the environment there right now, because they have dust storms, salt storms. It's just crazy. But I really like this place because I walked here, and as you can see, it's just beautiful formations everywhere. There's now canyons everywhere. All right, so let's continue on why mirrorless will prevail. Focus by wire. Okay, so if you look at your lenses today, that you know, anyone who's a DSLR shooter here, when you move the focus ring, whether your camera is turned on or turned off, the focus will change. Now, that's the mechanical drive. With the focus by wire system, it's a new way of focusing, where the focus ring is actually not attached into anything mechanically. Because of that, they can do a lot of really cool things. With the mechanical drive lenses, these are the old traditional lenses, right? You've got, they're very slow. You know, if you have really old lens designs, they have something called screw drive design where they're super slow and super inefficient and very noisy. But now they're using linear electromagnetic motors. And these are basically autofocus actuators. They're like little engines inside lenses that can super quickly focus. And because of that, they can deliver much faster, more precise autofocus. Focus by wire results in reduced power usage, so you get more battery life out of them, more flexible lens design choices, and it decouples the physical focus ring. So that allows you to actually, on the Canons, now they're putting like 3 separate rings, and each ring can serve a different purpose. You can actually program one of the rings. Instead of focusing, you can say, change the aperture, or change ISO. You could change the ISO by just rotating the ring on some of these new systems. And the only way they can do that is by decoupling physically some of these rings on the lenses. So those are all flexible design choices. And then a practically unlimited future potential. There's so many different things. Now they're even putting function buttons on the lenses where you press the function button and it could track the subject's eye or do whatever you want the camera to do. So essentially, your lens becomes a true extension to the camera body because it's all electronic. So DSLR manufacturers are currently at a transitional state to mirrorless. This is the part that I want to talk about and highlight in a little bit. Let's go through some quotes. This is North Island, New Zealand. This is Canon Europe talking, okay? Should the market demand it, we're ready to create new EF mount lenses, DSLR lenses. But for now, our focus is RF. In fact, this year, they're only going to make RF lenses. Last year, they haven't released a single EF mount lens. What this means is they're basically telling their clients, look, if you really ask us to make a DSLR lens, we will consider it. But for now, we're basically moving to RF. RF is the new mirrorless system, which means that Canon is putting all the efforts towards mirrorless. They're shifting away from DSLRs in terms of engineering. This is Nikon. This is Kei Joichi, one of the managers of Nikon. He said, we are at the transitional stage at the moment with our customers. What this means is Nikon is basically officially telling, look, yes, DSLRs are great. We still have tons of clients. We're still ready to support the system, but we're moving to mirrorless. So if 2 of the main big players on the market are telling you that they're in the transitional state, what this means to us photographers is that DSLRs are transitioning to mirrorless. Whether you want it or not, this is a matter of time. It's going to happen. Okay? This is actually inside a glacier in Switzerland. Anybody been to Switzerland? Beautiful country. Yeah. All right. So what it means for us photographers. Okay. You'll hear some mirrorless people say, DSLR is dead. Don't use a DSLR anymore. Okay. And then a DSLR photographer will say, I'll give you my DSLR when you pry it from my cold, dead hands, right? It's just a saying. What it means is some people are so stuck up on this issue, right? Some people will be like, yeah, DSLR is dead, move away. And other people will say, no, this is the only way for me. I am not going to change, right? And the thing is, it's called fanboyism. There's a word in English, really like it. It's just unnecessary. Because if you think about it, like, it's not about a war, right? It's just about transition. It's about the future. This is in Italy, photographed with an ultra-wide angle lens, but it was really cool to stand there and photograph. I had to wait for people to pass. So the truth is somewhere in between. Okay, Nikon and Canon, they buried their APS-C DSLRs. APS-C are the smaller than full frame because they failed to release good lenses for them. And Nikon and Canon have been like, you know what? If you really want some good lenses, buy the full frame lenses. The problem with that is you're buying, if you have like a Nikon D7500, which is an APS-C, or a Canon 7D, or one of those small sensor cameras, if you are buying a lens that's made for full frame, you're wasting your money, first of all. You're wasting space because it has a bigger image circle and weight. So Fuji X capitalized on it. They said, you know what, we're going to make APS-C, and we're going to capitalize on it just with APS-C lenses. And their lenses are smaller, they're super sharp, they're very good, the system itself is excellent. And Nikon and Canon, they're like, you know, it's okay. You know, we'll for now, that's not our priority, we'll focus on full frame. But that shifts a lot of people, and for that reason alone, the APS-C DSLRs will be dead soon. That's my projection. And I think it makes sense because if you look at it, I'm going to pull out a mirrorless camera real quick, right? So this is the Fuji X-T30. Oops, sorry. That's all right. We'll pick it up later. I mean, look at the size of this thing, right? It's very, very small, very efficient, and the lenses that the lenses that they've been able to design for the system are designed for the size of the sensor. And that's a big deal because you're not wasting your money, you're not wasting unnecessary weight. You have these tiny lenses that are made for tiny cameras. Look at how small this thing is, right? So for that reason, why would somebody buy, if you're shopping for a brand new camera, why would you buy something that's really big and unnecessarily big just because you want a DSLR? It just doesn't make any sense because it's lighter, smaller, right? Full frame DSLRs will continue for the next 5 or so years and will be supported by, for many years to come. And this is obviously Nikon understands, Canon understands that market penetration is very big. There are lots of people, even in this room, there are lots of DSLR shooters, right? And the transition is very slow. They also recognize that Canon, Nikon, and Pentax shooters, they've been waiting, right? They've been waiting for Canon and Nikon to release their own systems. So they understand that transition is very slow for a lot of people. So what it means for us photographers is also that the used market for DSLR lenses and cameras will increase. And that's bad news if you want to transition from DSLR to mirrorless. Because if you want to transition, if you want to sell off your DSLRs, there's going to be thousands of other people trying to sell their DSLRs because they want to move to mirrorless. But it's good news if you want to buy all that stuff for real cheap, okay? So if you are like, you know, if you don't have a full frame camera right now, just wait. In about a year or two, they're going to be so dirt cheap, you'll be able to buy like Nikon D810, a $3,000 camera for like a couple $100. So it's amazing news for all the budget photographers, right? You don't have to spend thousands of dollars. But bad news for those who are moving to mirrorless. So in a way, those who move to mirrorless, they're the guys with money. Okay, they're going to be buying and they're like, okay, I don't need my old system, so I'll sell it for cheap. So that's really good for a lot of people with smaller budgets. Also Death Valley, we'll come back to that a little bit later. All right, so while we're busy fighting, okay, and people are saying, oh, mirrorless is dead, or mirrorless is the future, DSLR is dead, and blah, blah, blah. Both mirrorless and DSLR sales are on the decline. The camera market is just being devastated. Okay, so that's something we're going to talk about next. Look at this. So this is years from 2003 to 2019. This is annual sales according to CIPA, which tracks basically how many millions of units are sold worldwide. The yellow bar is point and shoot. Okay, point and shoot is basically any camera. You know, back in the day we have point and shoot cameras. Nowadays we don't really have them anymore because look at what happened to them. Less than DSLR, or the blue line is interchangeable. ILC is interchangeable lens camera. These are DSLR mirrorless. And if you look at what happened, we went to the rise of the digital camera. In 2008, it peaked at 110 million units sold. A lot of people were like, ooh, cameras, you know, we're going to buy cameras. And the people were buying and buying and buying. And then, you know, the interchangeable lens cameras, they went from very small niche market to 20 million units shipped worldwide in 2012. And this shows the devastation of the camera market overall. Because for all camera manufacturers, Canon, Nikon, even Sony, this is where they were making the money, not here. That blue line is a very small niche. Your DSLR and mirrorless cameras, they're a small niche compared to the point and shoot. For camera manufacturers, this was devastating. In fact, for that reason, if you look at what's happening in the industry, right, Canon and Nikon, they're all saying, oh, we're, you know, year after year, they're showing losses and the market demand is falling, we went down from 110 plus this, so that's 120 million units shipped in 2008 to 15 last year. Just imagine that, and what it means for them. And we'll talk about the effect of this. New Zealand, South Island, very beautiful place. Now, we'll talk about the smartphone versus the camera. When are we taking the break? Can I continue or? Okay, all right. So the reason why some of the things that have been happening because of the smartphone. So let's talk about that next. This is Istanbul. Anybody been to Istanbul? Fairly close. Yeah, beautiful. It's, yeah? Kız Kulesi. Anybody speak Turkish? All right. Hmm? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Istanbul. All right. So smartphone casualties. Let's talk about that. The smartphone, right? Like, who would think you guys are sitting here with your smartphones? By the way, if anybody wants a copy of this presentation, you don't have to take pictures. Sorry, but I noticed a lot of you guys are doing it. Point and shoot cameras are decimated. Like, look at what that did. And, to that, decimated. They're basically gone now. Point and shoot cameras, nobody's buying them. Nobody wants them. They're basically done for. Waterproof and tough cameras, your iPhone is waterproof. Your Android is waterproof, right? They're like, you can drop them in the water, no problem. Tough cameras, the same way. They're getting devastated. GoPro, anybody has a GoPro? That's the stock of GoPro today. Look at what happened at their rise. GoPro was an amazing future camera, right? Everybody talked about it. They did all the sponsorships. They paid for all the Red Bull commercials you've seen, right? All the money that they spent, they dumped money on advertising. That's GoPro today. It's going to be a non-existent company. Why? Because this thing can do it. You can take slow-mo, you can take HD, now ultra-wide camera, 3 lenses, right? Like, who buys that stuff anymore? Nobody buys that stuff. Nowadays, they have housings for anything you want. GoPro is a goner. Entry-level DSLR cameras. I talked about this earlier, right? APS-C sensor, all those entry-level, the Nikon D3000 series. I was in, if you go to the United States, you go to like a Costco or a Sam's Club, you'll see boxes of that stuff stacked. Nobody's touching them. Why? Because you go to a place, right, it's so much more convenient to just pull it out of your pocket and take pictures rather than go and lug with the entry-level DSLR. Any small sensor systems, and a lot of camera manufacturers are very sensitive in that department, especially camera system like Micro Four Thirds, Olympus. Panasonic recognized it. They moved into the L-mount alliance, so they're now moving to full frame. Olympus said, nah, we're just going to stick there. And the thing is, they're in a very high-risk situation because it's 1-inch, it's a very small Micro Four Thirds sensor, which is very close to a 1-inch sensor from the performance standpoint, and that's very close to what the iPhone can do nowadays or the Android phone can do. So now they have the same risk. Video camcorders, I talked about this earlier, right? Nobody's going to walk around with those flippy screens and one-handed thing when your phone can do it. And storage needs are moving to cloud storage. All right, a lot of them, Canon just introduced cloud storage for their upcoming mirrorless camera, that they're going to release, which means that nowadays, as you take pictures, you'll be able to store them in the cloud without having to worry about storage. And this is all bad news for the camera industry, okay? Because all these things, all these casualties that are taking place, they're very serious for the camera manufacturers. Now, look at this graph. Okay, so on the left, you go from 0 to 150. That's 150 million units sold. This is 1,500, which is 1.5. Okay, so that's one more zero added to it. That's the scale of the smartphone sales. So smartphone went from practically non-existent market share to 1.5 billion units shipped worldwide last year. And look at this graph going up and this graph going down. The smartphone is killing the camera industry. It's a very direct correlation. And in the beginning, they all wondered, why is it happening? Why are we experiencing that? Why is the point and shoot being killed, right? Well, when you have a smartphone, if you go to a concert, if you go to a restaurant, look at what people are shooting with. Everybody's shooting with a smartphone, right? And they don't care about a big camera. They don't want to use that big camera or point and shoot. Like, nobody's using, anybody here using point and shoot nowadays? I mean, those things are basically done for, right? For a lot of people who own them, they just sit and gather dust in their closet. But that is a huge difference. And that, you know, it started with, in 2008, there were 122 million units shipped, which was already higher than the point and shoot market. But that number is devastating, and that's why this is going to continue to decline. And it gets to the point now, here's something really interesting that happened. Look, in 2014, point and shoot was about, you know, twice the size of the interchangeable lens market. Then it went down, 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 down. And for the first time in 2018, point and shoots were less than DSLR mirrorless cameras. That's crazy. If you think about it, right? People used to buy those things, the Canons, the Nikons, the little point and shoot cameras, they used to buy them all the time. In 2018, more people bought mirrorless and DSLRs than they did point and shoot. That market is gone. And you know, for a lot of manufacturers, you know, Samsung, when they saw this, in fact, Samsung used, you know, made an excellent NX system. They quit the game because they realized this early on. This is a very bad place to be for a camera manufacturer. So it's very interesting what's happening, but the domination is very clear. The smartphone is doing a lot of crazy stuff. Also Death Valley, and really love the moon there. It was just during the day, and when you have the stormy clouds and it was standing out like that, I had to take the picture. So what is happening here? We've got something called a big camera complexity problem. Okay, as a photographer, and you guys are all photographers here, you know what it's like to shoot with your camera. First, you set up the camera, you take pictures, then you have to transfer it to a computer that has enough memory and processing power to, you know, be able to handle those high resolution files. Then you have to import that into a photo application or video application like Lightroom and whatnot. Then you have to organize and sort it. Then you have to post-process it, right? Sit down and edit all those images. Then you have to export it. Then you have to back up. And the very end is where you publish it on social media or you print it out. This is what we have to work with on a day-to-day basis as photographers. Now compare to that smartphone workflow. Capture images with a single button. Post-process using the built-in or third-party apps that you have on your phone. Publish and share. What is the difference between the workflow here and the workflow there? It's very clear, right? Why is it happening? Because manufacturers realize, you know, this is stupid. If I can have one button on this thing, I can give it to my child, they'll be able to take a picture. My mom can take a picture. I give them my camera, there's like 1,000 buttons on this thing, right? Like, look at all the dials and the buttons. Who wants to mess with this? Right? People don't want to touch these things because they're complex. And short attention span is the biggest issue with the young generation today. They don't want to deal with that stuff. Whatever, in fact, there are scientific studies that are made about how the human brain works. Apparently, our brain, we are wired to choose whatever is easier. As humans, we don't want to think. We were like, okay, if there are two routes to take, one is more complex, one is a shorter and quicker route, I'm going to take the shorter and quicker route. People do not want to do complex things. And that's having an impact on our future generation because our children, they're born and they're having, you know, you give them the iPad, and you know, you've seen the kids everywhere. Here I see it in the malls all the time, the little kids, they sit down and, you know, they figure it out. They're 2 years old and they're just playing with an iPad or iPhone, whatever you toss at them, right? But you give them that thing, they'll be like, what the heck is that? Right? So whatever is the shortest route, that's what they're going to take. And that is a huge problem for camera manufacturers because how can you sell this, right? When you say, oh, buy my camera, how can you sell that versus a single button? It's very clear what's happening here. So for that reason, they're losing big time. Oh, this is also Colorado in the fall. If you guys have a chance to come to Colorado, I welcome you guys as a guest. Love going there in the fall, and as you can see, all of those are aspens. They're everywhere. There's just billions. And in fact, one thing that a lot of people don't know, an aspen is not a single tree. It's a living organism. And if you look at these different patches, like this is a green patch, this is a yellow patch, this is more yellow here. This is one aspen. This is another one, and this is another one. That's why they mature at different stages. So they have the same root system, and they just spring up like mushrooms. Beautiful tree. Heard of Aspen, Colorado? Yeah, Aspen, Colorado is also very close to this place. All right, the smartphone versus the camera. Okay, we talked about the smartphone workflow. By the way, this is in Faroe Islands. Also a beautiful location. You get all these crazy formations everywhere. Smartphone versus camera research and development. Let's see at who's got the money. Camera manufacturers total 111 billion market capitalization, and I'm only counting 3 now. Others are smaller for the most part. Sony is big, obviously, because Sony doesn't just make cameras. Their camera division is actually much smaller than that number, but as a company, it's a huge company. So Nikon, 3.96 billion, Canon, 26.2 billion, Sony, 80 billion. Now look at these smartphone manufacturers, 3.75 trillion. Apple by itself, $1.37 trillion. Google, $1 trillion company. Microsoft, $1 trillion company. And when you look at who's got the money, who's going to spend the money to make something better? Look at the last releases of the iPhone. If you guys look at the keynote presentations, they're now using the words bokeh, which you never heard before. Oh, look, our iPhone can take a beautiful picture and isolate the subject from the background. Right? They talk about all these fancy camera features. They talk about resolution. Why? Because they want people to genuinely perceive that all they need is the iPhone. They don't need a point-and-shoot camera, or they don't need an advanced camera. Why do you need that? It's more convenient. And you know, Apple is a very interesting company from the marketing standpoint. They went right at the heart of this thing with those shot on iPhone pictures. I've seen them in Dubai here. As you drive on the streets, you know, you see the ultra wide angle shots, and they're on a billboard. Giant images on the billboard taken with the iPhone. What does that tell you, right? For everyday customer, everyday person who's thinking about image making, they're going to think, well, if it's big enough, if it can be good enough to fit on a billboard in Dubai, that should be good enough for my family pictures. So people are buying more and more, and smartphone manufacturers know this. So what they're doing is they realize, okay, we already grown to a very mature market. We already know a lot of things, and we already have a lot of clients, but we're going to have more by getting into the camera industry. So the camera industry is getting devastated for that reason alone, because they're now pushing more features that used to be only available on advanced cameras. Let's talk about those. This is in Uzbekistan, and it's a beautiful, beautiful structure. Hopefully we'll have a chance to look at more images from Uzbekistan later today. But it's called the Kalyan Mosque. It's in a city called Bukhara. Al-Bukhari was from the city. Okay, so smartphone technology. Let's talk about what's happening and how the smartphones are going to continue dominating. Resolution. This is the next thing that's going to happen. Technology called sensor shift, where the sensor is going to move because of the stabilization and create higher resolution images. They are doing image stacking, where they're taking one shot. When you press on a one shot, especially in a low light situation like this in a room, they now have the ability to do image stacking, where they can take 10 images and they average the noise out, and you have a much beautiful, much better image with low noise. Multiple cameras, right? We talked about this, like, you know, the iPhone 11 Pro, 3 cameras now, and the next releases, they're going to have more. In fact, the upcoming iPhone 12 is going to have a separate camera for doing the 3D sensing. Noise, right? We talked about image stacking, and now they're utilizing artificial intelligence. You know, with those kind of money, with the amount of money that they have, they can do this, obviously. A lot of research goes into this. Low light photography. Now they have, you know, all kinds of things like AI scene recognition, where it knows that you're taking a picture of the Milky Way, and it knows that it needs to, you know, take a series of images at very slow shutter speeds and automatic post-processing. They're doing focusing and image stacking to be able to do that. So the Android, the latest Google Pixel, can take pictures of the Milky Way, like handheld, not attached to a tripod. Nowadays, like, if you want to take a picture with an astro image, you have to put your camera on a tripod, and you sit and wait, right? With the phones, with that Google Pixel phone, you can now take pictures at night handheld of the Milky Way. Things that you cannot do on regular cameras, you can do with on a smartphone. Dynamic range, they have practically unlimited dynamic range now because they're able to do scene recognition. They see that one part of the sky is very bright. They the exposure only on that part of the sky and automatically merge the images with artificial intelligence. Subject isolation, they're now doing through artificial intelligence and scene recognition and depth sensing. They can see how far away the subject is, and they can blur the background. And you can do all kinds of depth calculations. Focal length, we talked about that. And new technologies that are coming up. Augmented reality is already a reality. Anybody uses the PhotoPills app on the phone? PhotoPills, you use that to plan moon, sun, and astrophotography. They use augmented reality already, which you literally just look at the sky and you can see the scene, and it will show you where the moon is going to be at what time. And they're layering information together now using augmented reality. And you're going to be able to put objects in a scene that don't exist by just using this technology. Smart post-processing with machine learning. 3D scanning and depth sensing. That's the next thing that's going to happen. They're already talking about this for Android and the iPhone, where they're going to add one more camera, and we'll be able to tell that your subject is 1 meter away or 2 meters away and be able to do all kinds of crazy calculations. 8K video with HDR. It's already a reality. We don't have 8K on any cameras today. And the new Samsung, whatever, the latest one that came out, it already has 8K video. So think about this. Like, this is all, if you're a new customer, right, and somebody says, well, I don't want to be able to do 8K. Well, why do you need a camera? You can just buy a Samsung and you have that, right? And it does impact everything that's happening in the market. Switzerland, and I really love this little home that was there by itself in the middle of this crazy location with waterfalls and everywhere. And it's just a stunning location. This is on the northern part of Switzerland. Okay, so let's talk about web statistics and things that are happening. So this is 2009. The desktops were literally 100%. Desktop is your computer at home, right? In 2009, there was no iPad, there was no smartphone to threaten your desktop. All the content, everything that was published was viewed on the desktop. In 2017, the smartphone went higher than the desktop for the first time. And ever since, the desktop has been basically decimated. What it means is that, look at the numbers. Went from 100% to 46% in 10 years. In technology, that's very fast. Lost to the smartphone in 2017. So that graph shows it very clearly. In 2017, more content is being viewed on a smartphone than a desktop. And that's a worldwide figure. Okay? In some places, it actually, for some websites and regions, the smartphone has already gone over 80% reach. Social media market share is over 90%. Like, who uses Facebook on their desktop? Nobody does. All of you guys use Facebook app on your phone, right? And that's over 90%. These are scary numbers, and this is basic web statistics captured at night in Venice. Smartphones are basically the main device of consumption. Information consumption is happening on those little things that you guys are holding in your hands. The desktop market share is likely going to continue to diminish. So this is also, the smartphone is not just killing the camera industry, it's also killing the desktop manufacturers. All the big companies that are producing desktops, they're all getting devastated by this. And the tablet is likely going to continue to increase. Again, tablet, you look at the iPad, lighter, smaller. I gave my mom a laptop, and she's from the generation that is not used to using computers. She wasted like a week with that thing, and I tried to show her, here's the pointer, you move it, and she doesn't see sometimes the pointer, and she's like, you know what, I hate this thing. I gave her the iPad, and she's super proficient now. And she goes to Facebook and watches all the news media. I say, Mom, don't believe all the stuff on Facebook, but she does. For her, Putin is the best president in the world and all that stuff. It's crazy. You know, the stuff that they're doing on social media is kind of crazy. But anyway, the desktop market is going to continue. Tablets is going to increase market share just because lighter, smaller. Again, technology always wins. And social media has been dominating. This is a big factor. This is something for all photographers in any region to consider. It's very important. Now, let's look at some of these numbers. Instagram ad revenue. In 3 years, Instagram ad revenue went from $3.6 billion to $20 billion. Last year, in 2019, they officially announced $20 billion ad revenue. That compared to YouTube, YouTube made $15 billion, and YouTube shares money with the content creators. Instagram doesn't. If you guys notice, I mean, everybody uses Instagram here, right? Anybody here that doesn't use Instagram? No? Everybody uses Instagram. If you guys notice that every third post now is an ad, it's a video ad of some sort of ad, right? It's actually annoying. But it doesn't matter because $20 billion. You know, Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion. Can you imagine that? In just 3 years. Facebook ad revenue from $764 million to almost $70 billion in 10 years. Google ad revenue from $23 billion to $162 billion in 10 years. Now, I project that Google is going to experience slowdown and decline in their advertising revenue. Anybody wonders why? Okay, the main reason for that is because with Google, they got in trouble in Europe. You know, they had to pay, I think it was like $1.5 billion settlement in Europe. Do you know why? Because they were taking people's data. Okay, you know, you have a Gmail, people have Gmail accounts here. Okay, have you guys noticed, like, you'll receive an email with something, and then the next thing you see, there's an ad related to something in your email? Right? This happened in the past. Why? Because Google has to collect data. They have to collect data because whoever has the data can sell information. And I'm not just talking about selling private information. It's literally just Google ad placements. Now, if I'm smart, right, and if I want to advertise, say I want to advertise my photography services in Dubai, I have to pay Google money so that I can show that advertising to whoever searches for a photographer in Dubai, right? I pay that money to Google. Now, if I pay that money to Google, and Google says, okay, so we can actually define different markets for you. Instead of just Dubai, or instead of just United Arab Emirates, we can give you just Dubai. That's already, in order for them to be able to do that, they need to know that whoever they're targeting lives in Dubai and not some other emirate. Okay, does that make sense? This is all information, and it's called information segregation. So they need to be able to provide that data. Google has to collect it somehow. How they collect it? Through whatever means they could. Now, they killed their Google Plus social media network, so they can't really collect that from that. So they have to go and collect the information basically illegally, and that's what they got in trouble for. Now, what is Facebook doing and what is Instagram doing? When you guys signed up for your Facebook account, you remember you cannot just put some fake information. Yeah, I have to say that I'm Nassim Mansurov, and you know, people willingly give this information. Nobody forces them to. You open a Facebook account, you give them your marital status, right? Married to this guy, and then they know all of your friends, right? They know where you live because you have, you know, geolocation turned on your phone, and it will, you know, whenever you post, it will actually know where you're posting the photo from so that it can provide you relevant information. Facebook and Instagram and other social media, they're collecting information from people, and people are willingly giving that information. That's why they're not getting into trouble with any of the laws and regulations. Whereas Google and others, they have to steal that information. And because of that, they don't have enough information, especially now that a lot of things like GDPR, Europe implemented GDPR that blocks companies from doing third-party cookies and whatnot. All these things are happening. California just introduced a law that prohibits them from collecting information. More states will follow, more countries will follow. As a result, Google will not be able to take more information from you because unless you willingly provide to them, right? and where Facebook and Instagram are winning, that number is a no-joke number. And the reason why is because if I were to advertise on Instagram or Facebook, I can say, give me Dubai, give me a male between 18 to 40 who is not married. And Facebook or Instagram can give me that. I can actually provide, I can do advertising, direct advertising, to a very small niche of group of people that I want to target without having to spend money anywhere. Now, what happened to advertising on magazines and newspapers? They're all dead. Why are they dead? Because if somebody's paying money, right, to put on some inside some magazine, right, you don't even know, like, how many people actually read that? Okay, they give you some rough figures, but you don't have anywhere near targeting as they can do with this stuff. Because you can't say, okay, run a magazine ad that will target people in Dubai only, males who are not married between this age. You can't do that. So the traditional media is already dead, but not for that reason. Even TV ads are going to die. Everything is shifting to this because this is where people are. Information consumption has moved to the smartphone. And everything is being moved to the smartphone. That's why Instagram and Facebook, they're going to see more profits over time. Because they collect that information, and you guys everywhere, us, myself included, as much as I hate those guys, and I'll be very honest, you know, Brother Tariq knows, we talked about this many times, I don't like Facebook. Right? The stuff that they've done, they've done some crazy stuff. But nobody seems to care, especially in the Middle East. Like, you guys are Facebook addicts almost. You know, I go to places and I see how many people are using Facebook. I'm mind-boggled by the reach. They have more reach in this region than they have in the United States. I'm not joking. It's true. You guys are all Facebook, crazy Facebook. But Instagram is now surpassing all the estimates that they've ever had. In fact, I think this year they were almost like 30% of all the Facebook revenue. I mean, just look at the numbers. 20 billion versus 70 billion. And that number is going to go up. Why? Because of social media influencers. All these people, you know, you guys are following other photographers and those social media influencers, right? They're getting paid by someone to post content, and you guys are following them, so you become targets. So this is something that we all have to keep in mind because we can learn from this, right? Because we are all trying to be in this business. All right. This is in Colorado, and it's a really old mill that stood there, and it's a beautiful location, but with the fall colors, it really, really stands out. Yes, sir. Okay. In fact, you know what? I think I'm very close to being done. Do you want to take a break now? Okay. Yeah, let's take a break. It's okay. Let's take a break. We'll come back to this.
15 minutes.
All okay? I'm good, I'm good. I have water. I have water. Maybe somebody has.
Possible to get one of the waters or somewhere else that I
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
because you're using that.
No, I'm only using this one. Go ahead. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Turn it off for now? Okay. Did that bore you to death yet? See, I normally like talking about, composition, photography, but they said, there are so many people that come here to talk about that they wanted me to do something different. That's why, it was actually not my choosing. This is my first time ever doing a presentation like this. I've never done it before. Most of the time, I like talking about photography, composition, light, subject. My passion is more landscapes because this is, for me, when I left my IT career, the reason why photography connected with me was because I went out to nature, sit down, and it was a very calming moment. Something in IT, anybody here in IT? Okay, you guys know what it's like, right? I mean, it's just crazy. You deal with so much stuff, and going out and doing photography was just something that healed me from the inside. So for me, it's like that's what I really like doing, is going out and taking pictures. That's my passion. Which one is that?
Canon.
But which one? The USR? Yeah. Did you hear about the R5 that they're going to release?
Yeah, I'm ready for that.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing camera. I really like that. I'm not so sure about the back thing though. I wasn't sure about this.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of a weird thing. But the new lenses that they're making for that, incredible, incredible. Yeah. All right, are we good to continue? Okay, perfect. All right, let me grab this thing. Okay, so I guess the big question is, and this is something that we're going to talk about next, I think how it applies to us photographers. But first of all, what can the manufacturers do? This is kind of crazy, right? Everything that I showed you so far, showing the devastation of the industry, this is very bad for manufacturers. And I think where manufacturers need to come out and start thinking about their own future is by focusing on making superb cameras. And this is obviously something we're already seeing. They realized it. Look at Canon, Nikon with the mirrorless releases. They know this is the future. And in fact, if you're Nikon or Canon shooter, I would argue that Canon and Nikon did the right thing by waiting. There was no reason to accelerate into this. If they fully understand their market, they understand that photographers do take time to switch and move on to something different. For them, just waiting it out and seeing what the landscape is going to be was a smart idea. So producing large sensor cameras with exceptional image quality is something that they need to focus on. But the great ergonomics is a big part of it. Another thing is easy-to-use software, and this is the problem. So this they're already doing. We know that Nikon, Canon are doing great cameras. We know that. This is where they're failing. Okay. Easy-to-use software is simple firmware with frequent updates. This is where all the camera manufacturers, and Canon is now doing it, Nikon is now doing it. Nikon just announced the firmware 3.0 for the Z series. Canon produced the latest firmware that's amazing with the eye tracking. It's working amazingly well. They need to do this more often. And the ability to earn new customers, this is something that they need to concentrate on because they're losing their market share to the smartphone in many ways. This is Colorado, by the way, and this was last November, as the light as the sun was coming down, it just shone the light, and as you can see, there are layers. So this first layer is just the light from the sun. Then there's aspen trees that changed color. Then there's another layer over here, the darker color, and this is evergreen line, so all the evergreen trees. And that peak right there, it's called Mount Sniffles. It's in the southern part of Colorado. Just a beautiful landscape. I just love going there to witness moments like this. It's such an amazing, amazing landscape. Okay, so what's likely to happen? This is my personal view, and I think this is what's going to happen, and it's unfortunate. I think that smartphones will continue to take more from the camera market. I mean, just looking at the advancements and the things that they're doing, they're going to continue doing that. Now they're going to make more lenses, more resolution, more this, more that. They're going to take more chunks of money from the camera market until that camera market basically becomes a niche. And that, in a way, some people think, well, that's scary, right? That's kind of scary because what's going to happen with all the camera manufacturers? Yes, some of them will probably go under. And if I were Pentax, I'd be worried right now. Pentax has not been able to do much. They haven't released much. Now, Pentax is owned by Ricoh. I'd be worried. If I were Micro Four Thirds, I'd be worried. The big camera manufacturers, Nikon, Canon, Sony, they're likely to stick around for a while because they also have other divisions. Like Canon is a huge company. Anyone who's in IT knows that they also make like copiers and printers and so many different things. So as companies, Sony and Canon, they have a lot of other funding that helps them survive. Nikon is a little bit more difficult, but they also have their industrial side where they sell a lot of different things and different solutions for the industries. So the fact, though, is that the big camera manufacturers, they're going to focus on more niche products. And that blue graph that I showed you with the interchangeable lens market, that's really the only graph that's going to remain. So their goal is they need to focus more on these two. If they can make easy-to-use cameras, if they can make cameras that really produce stunning image quality, and they need to start advertising. This is something that, why does the iPhone win at the end? Why does Android and Google, all those trillion-dollar companies, what are they doing? They're spending money on showing images. Look at Dubai. Look at all the big cities. You go to New York, you see a huge billboard with a shot on iPhone on the bottom, right? Now, last time, say when you have the solar eclipse, the lunar eclipse, and all these amazing events, why, my partner, Spencer, he talked about this in one of our last videos on YouTube. We did this live event where we're talking about it, and he said, why don't they capitalize on it? Like, if you take an iPhone or an Android and try to take a photo of a moon, it just looks like a white blob, right? Why don't you just produce a beautiful image of that and put it on a billboard in Dubai and say, shot with a Canon or shot with a Nikon? Why aren't they doing that? Right? Because then somebody sees that and they're like, wow, so you can't take a picture like that on the iPhone, but you can if you have a Canon or a Nikon. This is something they need to learn from, right? And if you look at National Geographic, anybody here National Geographic subscriber? With National Geographic, you see so many ads, and if one of the things that Canon has done right for many years, they show this beautiful image of a cheetah, right? And it's just like chilling out and sitting on the grass, and on the bottom, very small letters says shot, with a Canon. I will say the model number and whatnot. And that's the stuff that they need to do more. They need to create more brand awareness, and the fact, where's the fine line between, where's the difference between the smartphone and the camera, so that people have a better understanding. Because what's going to happen is, obviously, they're targeting the main audience. They're targeting everyone, right? But these camera manufacturers, they need to target a smaller niche and explain to people, this is what you get with our products. Okay, so this is Venice, by the way, and I was there right before it flooded. It flooded like really, really crazy earlier this year. It's very unfortunate, but it's very susceptible to now the environmental impacts in Venice. Anyway, what does it mean, all of this that I've showed you today? What does it mean to photographers? Embrace technology or else. Remember Kodak? Kodak is no more. That company thought, oh yeah, we're so big we cannot fail.
The pioneer.
Yeah, they're gone. They were the pioneers. They've done so many things. They've had so many things that they owned, and they own the market. And they're gone now. They're completely demolished. Anybody know film photographers who didn't adapt to digital? You guys know those people, right? They just sat there and said, hey, you can't take my film camera from me. This is my life. I will live with it. And they never adapted to digital. Who are they now? They're all gone. Right, those people. And I'm generalizing, of course, but there are some people who focus on specific types of film photography. That has become more of a niche and trend on its own within that niche. But on the big scale, those guys are basically gone. Understanding market trends. This is very important. Smartphone domination as media and information consumption. You need to understand that. This is very important. So for you, as a photographer, being able to create consistent, high-quality content on all platforms. When I say all platforms, don't just focus on Google or just Facebook. You need to look at what's happening in the market. Where are things going? And tomorrow, it may not be Facebook. It might be some other platform. And if that happens, you need to be able to make that jump, because whoever is an early adopter is the winner. And the importance of a strong brand. Every photographer needs to recognize this. The branding is the only thing that matters today. Really. Because everything else you can build up. But if you have a very poor brand to start with, or if you're not a good representation of your brand, then that's a huge problem. Understanding the importance of social media marketing. You need to analyze your market. You need to know what that market represents, how many people, what's your target reach, what are you trying to do with your photography services. If you can't do it, then you need to find someone else who will. And you need to be really smart about the advertising spend. Magazines, newspapers, and all those guys, why are they suffering? Why are they all dying off? And National Geographic is one of the few breeds that's out there, and they're surviving because of the amazing efforts that they put into what they do, right? They have a very strong brand. But look at everyone else. Look at all the other publishers. In the United States, they're all no more. Chicago Sun-Times fired all of their photographers a while ago because they're now outsourcing their services. Companies cannot afford having full-time photographers as staff anymore. Why? Because there's someone else who will do it for cheap. So this is all a competition game, and you need to know how to spend that advertising money. As a photographer, as a person who's providing services, you need to know where you're putting your money, because you cannot just buy a magazine spread and think that it's going to work. Or go on Google and think that putting some keyword for Dubai family photographer is going to work. Because things are shifting on different platforms. And giving out free content, this is something that's becoming more and more important. And there are so many people out there that talk about this all the time. You can't just advertise and hope you're going to win, because people have now matured. You know how back in the day there was all this advertising that would show, well, it's still out there, unfortunately. It's very dominant. You go to a website, even Photography Live, for my website, there's banner advertising. Has anyone in this room ever clicked on a banner ad? Nobody does. Like, who cares about banner ads? It displays some stuff on a website. Nobody clicks on that stuff. And yet companies are willing to spend money to put banner ads on platforms that are not even relevant to them. Billion-dollar companies, they spend millions of dollars on advertising, and they're putting it in the wrong bucket. And what's happening is they're not getting the kickback, the feedback, and then they start losing out in the long term. So you need to be smarter about how you place your advertising. Because if you know what your niche market is, and you specifically target that niche market. For example, as a photographer, if you photograph families, right, and you are in a part of Dubai, you can actually use social media today and say, I want to target people who are married, who are between the ages of, 18 to 40. Those are the likely candidates, right, for family photography, maybe even more. And then you could say, and I want to target females. You could do that. But if you're just going to spit out an ad and hope that it works, it no longer works. So you have to be smart about how you do this. New Zealand. So who's a photographer in 2020? What does it mean to be a photographer? You're the brand ambassador in the face of the company. That's number one. As a photographer, you represent the face of your company. You might be a single individual, you might be working with a group of people, but your face is the face of the company. Strong marketer and seller. You have to be very strong being an amazing marketer and seller. If you're not going to survive, I can tell you that. You're a highly engaged individual. You network with other people, with other photographers, with whoever you need to network with in order to expand your line of business and your audience. You're a leader believer, pusher, and doer. So back in the day, there were photographers, and they would do their thing, and everybody would go to them because they were the only thing that was available. Your competition is very fierce right now. Whoever is the leader, believer, pusher, and doer, they're coming forward, and they're doing those things because they're able to sell. The very last attribute is the photographer. I put it in that order for a very specific reason. Now, how many photographers do you know who are very bad photographers but amazing marketers? Raise your hand. You know those, right? Everybody knows those people. Yeah? They're poor. Like, you look at their work and you're like, what? And you know, they're making tons of money. And you're like, how is this possible? But there are tons of those. And there are, how many people know amazing photographers that are starving artists? Everybody knows those. So think about this. What is more important? Who's doing better? The guy who is an amazing photographer but a very bad seller, or the guy who's an average, maybe below average photographer, but he can talk to people, he can go and win customers? That's the guy who's winning. So the formula for success is, if you do those two things, if you're a great marketer first, and you're a good photographer, or great photographer, you have formula for success. Okay? So somebody, a lady earlier asked me, what do I need to do as a beginner photographer? You don't need to worry about that part. I can tell you that. Okay? Sell first. That's the most important thing, I would argue. This is a place in South Island of New Zealand, and it's Moraki boulders. They're very ancient things, and you can actually see them from the shore. As the water washes the dirt away, these things come out on the shore, and they're just a stack of them. Just a beautiful, beautiful location. Okay, so preparing for success. What do we do in 2020 as photographers? Number one, that's why I put it in there. You see that word? Yeah, that's really, to me, I think that's really the only thing that stands out today. If you don't do marketing very actively, if you don't promote yourself, if you're not the face of your brand, you are not going to be able to get far. Social media is number two. Okay? Why? Because after you learn how to market, you got to know where to put it. And social media is a big impact. I mean, you saw the numbers, right? Billions of dollars are being spent on Instagram and Facebook. Why? Because that's where things are. People, you guys in this room are spending, okay, admit it. I spend more than 1 hour on Facebook every day. Admit it. It's okay. Nobody's watching. Nobody's watching, okay? Oh, there you go. Okay, okay. I spent 30 minutes or so, half of that. Yeah. Facebook? Come on. Come on. Yeah, admit it. Instagram, more than 1 hour. Oh my God. Okay, you guys are all Instagram here. Okay, but check this out. Instagram started out as a photo app. People were posting photos. But you know that the photo sharing has gone down. You know what the #1 content on Instagram today is? Stories. It's all everything, videos and stories. It became a media outlet. It's no longer a photo thing. Now, in the United States, people are using Instagram, well, not just in the United States, worldwide. They're using it for food, you know, just to find out like which restaurants are hosting what kind of food. They're using it for like all kinds of networking. They're using it for so many different uses that in the beginning, you would never think that Instagram would have gotten there. Nowadays, Instagram is more than just a photo sharing app. It became the place for people to hang out. So, you know, you guys in this room, the majority of you are spending so much on Instagram. But I'll ask the next question now. So you spend more than an hour on Instagram. How much of that time in percentage do you spend to promote yourself? I can guarantee you it's closer to 0. So what you're doing is you're part of the problem. Literally, you are a consumer. You are somebody's selling something to you. Every 3 photos Somebody's selling something to you, and you're selling nothing. So how can this be? You're a photographer, and you're not selling anything. You're consuming, right? So you are a target market for someone else to be pushing their services to you. Whenever you see that every third ad, somebody pops up and says, hey, I take amazing pictures, right? And he's a Dubai photographer. You know what they're doing, and you're doing nothing. So who's going to win at the end? And he might be one of those guys with very poor photography, but yet he's doing something to push him or herself on the market. So books to read. And this is very basic. You know, I spent a lot of time. In fact, when I was doing information technology, right? I told you my last job was I was a vice president of information technology in a hotel management company. I realized as I climbed up the ranks of the corporate world, I was doing less and less of my job. I was doing more of psychology. It's incredible, and you guys know this. It's incredible how in the corporate world, people don't have basic interpersonal skills. Like, our human resources department hated the finance guys. The finance guys hated accounting guys. 90% of my work was sitting in the room making sure that they talk to each other. It's crazy, but interpersonal skill is a very basic skill that everybody needs to develop. And you as a photographer, what are you doing? You are talking to people. Your job is to talk to people. And if that's your job, your number one thing you need to be able to learn how to do is to connect to people with people very easily. And I can tell you, Dale Carnegie's book on how to win friends and influence people, that book is how many years old now? I can tell you today, 90% of the people that I personally talk to, that you guys talk to, don't have the very basic skills that that book communicates and explains how to do. Dale Carnegie wrote that book so many years ago. If you want to go back and kind of start over, understand basic things. For example, okay, I'm going to give you a couple of secrets. So I lead workshops, and I have people that come to my workshops. I can tell you spending time with someone for 10, sometimes longer, like 2 weeks, up to 2 weeks, is not easy. Brother Tarek knows this. You guys know this. How to work, you know, everybody's different. Everybody in this room is different. Somebody has, you know, you have your peculiarities, you know, you have your preferences, you have this, you have that. Everybody's different. Being able to cater to each person for a period of time is not an easy task. But one of the very first things I do on the day when people arrive, before that, I already prepared for a while trying to memorize the names. I haven't even seen the people. Okay? They show up to my class. The first day I try to do my class. They sit down in front of me, and I start memorizing. Okay, this person's name is this. This is Andrew. This is John. This is Steve. This is... And I just run through the exercise in my brain. All I'm trying to do is just remember their names. That's all. But you know how incredible and amazing it is? When on the first day, somebody tells them, hey, John, by the way, they all of a sudden their mind is blown for a second. They're like, well, wait a second, how does he know my name? And I'm like, I'm you know, first time meeting this guy, right? It's a very basic skill, but when you communicate with a person and you can just remember the person's name, it changes the way that they relate to you. So my job running the workshop, I'm a people pleaser. I have to. And I can tell you, I could be a very terrible photographer, for all that matters. But if I can relate to those people, and if I can make them feel hospitable, right? If I can make them feel at home, and that they're actually being taken care of, it changes the way they perceive my classes. It changes the way they talk to me. It changes the way they provide feedback. In fact, I would say 60 to 70% of my customers are repeat customers. Because once they experience my workshop, they want to come back. Why? Because they felt like they were humans. It's a very basic thing. You know, being able to come and approach a person, touch them. How does that make you feel?
Excellent.
Right? Because all of a sudden you feel connection. But we're so afraid of this. Why are we so afraid of this? Why are we so afraid to come hug a person? Right? Okay, maybe it doesn't work on every market. Okay, I understand, especially with females, you have to be careful here. I understand. It's okay. You don't have to. But you don't have to do those things. It doesn't have to be physical contact. It's being able to win the heart of the person. Right? If you can do that, you can do a lot of things. Now, there's a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk. Has anyone heard of him in this room? Yeah? One person? Two people? Okay. You know, he's a little rough. I'll tell you that. If you watch some of his YouTube stuff, it's a little bit overwhelming. He's a fast talker. And, you know, he's from New York, and he has the attitude. Sometimes, you know, he'll drop an F-bomb here and there. But as a marketer, he's an amazing person, and he gives so much free material. He wrote a book called Jab, Jab, Right Hook. And I'll give you kind of a 30-second summary of the book. Jab, 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 3 times. What it means is you give something to someone 3 times before you can get something back. So his theory is you give content for free. Give content, and the ratio is 25 to 75. 75% of what you do is free content to make the world a better place. And 25% of that is collecting the money. Okay? Does that make sense? And works. I can tell you that. I can tell you it works. I run Photography Life. People come to my site every single day. All the content I provide is free. Everything is free. I have a couple of things that I run commercially here and there, but I don't even have to sell them. If you're so good and you've created such a strong brand, you don't have to sell yourself. People will come flocking because you are doing so much giving that people are going to say, you know what, that guy's amazing. I'm going to go to him because of that. Okay, another great book is Olivier Blanchard. It's the Social Media ROI. For those who don't know social media, I would highly recommend that book. And this is another very basic book by Stephen Covey. It's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And this is also basic psychology on so many levels. Basically shows what you need as a leader in a company, or if you want to do something. The basic habits that will get you there. Anybody read that book? Yeah? Very good book, don't you agree? Yeah? So I would say just make these your starting point, and there's so many great books out there. Just a word of warning, be careful about social media books, okay? So the social media ROI is pretty good, but you want to get it not from a source that's not authoritative. You want to find someone who's actually good at it. Like Gary, I mean, he's a very strong brand, you know, very strong voice. And the things that he does actually did change the industry. In many ways, he has influenced so many big companies and their decisions and their advertising spends. And I can tell you that a lot of companies are watching out for this kind of stuff. Because they realize, well, wait a second, we used to spend $10 million on advertising and that never worked. And we listened to one guy on YouTube and all of a sudden our lives have changed. This is something that you need to be on top of. So who are you as a photographer today? You're no longer the guy with the camera or the girl with the camera. Because anybody can do it. Anyone out there, you give them, heck, anybody can do it, anybody can do this. Like if they can do this, they'll just do whatever. Your competition is getting fiercer, stronger, and how are you going to be able to differentiate yourself? That's the question you need to ask yourself. And I think having basic resources on hand for you to be able to push yourself forward, not become a photographer, but become a social media brand. Put your face. It's okay. You know, people think a lot of people think, well, I can't sell, I'm not good at it, you know, my face isn't pretty, I shouldn't be on Instagram. Nobody cares. Nobody really cares at all. How you look, you know, what you're wearing, none of that stuff. And people you think if you need to put a video on Instagram, you need to have a professional studio. Heck, look at all the guys that are doing it. They're literally just using their phones, walking around and talking to their phone doing it. So if you think there's something wrong with you, there is something wrong with you, I can tell you that. Okay? All right, this is, have you guys seen The Lord of the Rings? The Hobbiton in New Zealand? All right, so we came to conclusion. We'll do questions and answers in a second, but hope you learned something. You know, my goal, I do this a lot. I talk to people and, you know, I teach this kind of material, but not this kind of material. This is my first time doing a technical stuff, okay? So first of all, I hope you didn't find it too boring. Hope you learned something. Now, another thing, okay, technical mumbo jumbo. What is mumbo jumbo? Which camera brand is better? Is it Nikon, Canon, so on? Who gives a darn? Seriously. Like, do your clients even know what you shot with? Nobody knows. Nobody cares. They don't. Your client doesn't care. Which camera mount is better? Really? You know, we sit here talking about, oh, Sony has done this, Canon has done that. Like, forget about those things. They're not important. Which lens is better? Really? Like, did your customer ever say, was that shot with a 50 millimeter or an 85? Was that wide open or stop down? How many megapixels are enough? If you have a 24 megapixel camera or even a 16, heck, even a 12. No problem. I can tell you that. In a second, you'll see why. Nikon versus Canon versus Sony versus blah, 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 blah. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. If you're spending your valuable time sitting and arguing with someone else about these things, you're the one who's going to lose. I can tell you that. Because at the end of the day, none of that is important. And if you were to ask me, Nassim, which system should I put my money into? I would say, I don't know. Whatever you like. You like Nikon? Stick with Nikon. You like Canon? Stick with Canon. But people make the mistake. They look at the news. They go to deep peer review and all these technical sites, and they start getting involved with all these conversation about whose is bigger, whose is, you know, lighter, whose is blah, blah, blah. Who cares? And then at the end of the day, they lose because they go from a system they're familiar with to a system that they have no clue about. This is a funny thing about Sony, and I know some people get very sensitive about that kind of stuff, but I was in my workshop in Colorado, and there was a guy who switched from a Nikon to a Sony. Okay, now those who shoot Sony know, you know, there's so many buttons on those things, and there's like they don't even put the right labels on them. Like I don't know why there's a C1, C2, C3 buttons. Like what do they do? Like okay, well, end of rant. But anyway, this guy, you know, he's in my workshop taking pictures, and as we were sitting eating breakfast, he somehow managed to reset his camera. I have never seen anyone more lost than that guy on that day. He was panicking. All of a sudden, his C1, he doesn't know what it's doing. Like everything, he went to some other website, found a guide that somebody wrote, configured his camera, and he just reset his camera, and he doesn't know what to do now. And he doesn't remember where he copied the settings from. All he knows is that when he was taking pictures, the C1 was doing the zooming thing, the C2 was doing something else. So he just remembers that, but he doesn't know how to set it back. If you are one of those guys, what are you doing? If new system you're going to switch to makes you so backwards that you have to relearn everything, what's the point of that? Nothing. I mean, you end up switching for no reason. If you like what you shoot with, that's the best camera. The grass is always going to be greener on the other side. So if somebody comes, and you know, another thing that happened, this was in my November workshop in Death Valley. I'm driving in the car with two ladies. And one of them is a Nikon shooter. The other one is a Sony, just switched. This is another Sony story. Not to hate on Sony, guys. Okay. So she switched recently from Nikon to Sony. Okay, and as we're sitting in the car and talking about it, you know, first she complains about the Sony. You know, I can't find this. The menu system is so complicated. I can't do this. I can't do that. And then we started talking about it, and I started questioning. But the first thing I said, you know, I'll tell you one thing. You didn't buy that camera because you wanted to. You went to some workshop or some event, and somebody spoke, and they were showing amazing pictures, and they said, this was all taken with the Sony. And then you were inspired by it, and you decided that you need to switch to make yourself a better photographer. Is this the case? And she said yes. And this happens among you guys, among us, among photographers all the time. Somebody comes out, and they will swear by it. They will say, this is the best thing since sliced bread. I can tell you, none of that matters. So if you get stuck in one of those things, keep in mind that the only thing that matters is you being able to take images. That's really the only thing that matters. Everything else, lenses, cameras, systems, blah, 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 it's a moot point. It doesn't matter. So all of this mumbo-jumbo stuff, that's for us in the room. Anyone outside of this room, right now, brother, you were showing me pictures from amazing photographers from all over the world. Right? People see refugees from Syria. They see all these images that truly stand out. Nobody asks what technique and camera and all that stuff. So anyway, that's all I've got for you today. If you guys are interested, I'll show you some more photos. But before we do, wait. Not yet. Thank you. Not yet. Okay, I'll go back for a second, and it might be easier for me to do it over here. I know you guys weren't really writing down which camera I was shooting with, but let's do this real quick. All right, so what is the shot with? Nikon? iPhone. Why? Is it pretty evident? I mean, it's the topic, right? Yeah. This was shot with like an old iPhone. This is from 5 years ago, 4 years ago. Shot it with an iPhone. Okay. What about this one? How? How is this possible? Look at the dynamic range. It's amazing. The colors are amazing. No, you're right. It's an iPhone. All right. This one? Same? Damn, you guys are... Okay, this one. All right, you figured it out by now. Yeah. Every single picture in this presentation, every single one of them, was taken with an iPhone. And I don't even know which one. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever I had on hand. This one, I took it at night, and this was not possible before. You couldn't do a photo like this that was noise-free, that looked very clean with a smartphone. So nowadays, everything is moving towards that, right? I mean, look at the same thing here. Yeah, every single image that you see here, that's from 3 years ago on iPhone 10, I think. Yeah. So this one is kind of evident. I mean, I love this one because you can see like there's blotching and that kind of stuff. It's very low light. This is like ISO, I don't know, probably ISO 6400 equivalent because, you know, the sensor is so tiny. But anyway. All right, so if you guys want, I have some images from Uzbekistan. So what I do nowadays is, I told you before, I'm originally from Uzbekistan. I haven't lived there for like 20-something years now. And I went back, I think for the first time in 17 years, I went back to my home country after the president switched and things have started finally changing. And I wanted to do something and kind of hope for my home country. So I went and talked to the Minister of Tourism, and we organized an event where I traveled the country for about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, basically from the capital all the way to the most remote areas. And this is in Karachi, Pakistan. It's by the Aral Sea. And I photographed everything. And you know, whatever I photographed with the people that I was with, we basically gave it away to the government. Because one of the reasons why I did that, when I arrived to Tashkent terminal, anybody has been to Uzbekistan before? No? Okay. See, that's the problem. right? A lot of people don't, in the United States, when people used to ask me, where are you from? And I would say Uzbekistan, they would say, Pakistan? No, 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 Uzbekistan. Afghanistan? No, 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 no. That used to be, yes?
Why don't you organize for us a photo trip to your country?
That would be great. I would love to. I literally, in the last, like I said, 17 or 18 years, I've only been there twice. So yeah, I'm kind of getting back, and you start feeling connected to your homeland, and this is something that I experienced. And with all the changes that were taking place, I said, anyways, going back to the story, when I came to Tashkent, the capital, we come out of the terminal, and there's a giant picture on the wall. And my wife is a food photographer. And she used to shoot weddings, and I would assist her. But there was a picture that my wife took and placed on her blog that whoever did the giant banner ad, they stole it, they removed the watermark, and it's on the wall at the terminal. And I'm like, okay, so we walk in, and I took a picture of that, and we start going to restaurants, and almost like every other restaurant has the food pictures that my wife took. And we went from one place to another, and it's like over and over and over again. And I said, you know what? There's something wrong here. Obviously, licensing is not something that they are aware of, but this, some of these are like official people doing it, right? So in my mind, I thought, okay, what is something that I can do? And I decided I'm going to take a bunch of it with the best equipment that I have with my medium format camera. So I went to Uzbekistan, and for like a period of 2 to 3 weeks, I took many photos, and I gave them all to Uzbekistan. I said, just to develop the country so that more people can learn about Uzbekistan. So I have another slide where I'd like to show you guys if you're interested. If not, then we can open up. All right, all right. So anyway, moving from smartphone pictures to a real camera. Okay, can you switch? Thank you. It would be really terrible if you're like, those pictures aren't really better than a smartphone. Thank you. Yes. Okay, so this is in Fergana Valley. That's where I'm from originally. They have a silk factory, and this is a lady working hand labor. If you guys ever buy silk from Uzbekistan, know that there's a lot of work that goes into it, and they make all kinds of beautiful, beautiful things. Switched. Okay. And this is in a province called Rishtan, and this is where they make all these plates, all handmade. The most incredible thing about this, which I didn't know, because you've seen people doing all kinds of handcraft and ceramics, but all of this texture that goes inside, it's their inspiration. And true artists that do the ceramic work, they don't use a pencil to draw stuff before. They literally just wing it. And they start making shapes, and then that work that he did, he will never make another one like that. Each time he has a different inspiration. And this is the apprentice doing the work. When I saw that, I was literally just, wow. I never thought that this was possible. I thought that they first trace something out, and then they draw over it. But he, right in front of me, he just did that. Like all those shapes inside, I wish I could show you the full plate and the finished work. But a lot of work goes into that kind of stuff, and this is just the apprentice. And they've been doing it for like 12, 13 generations, if not more. This is his master, also from Mirrorless, and as you can see, he's actually doing the physical work. And this is a really old system that they've been using, but a lot of this, the artists that they have, the amount of work and the effort that goes into this kind of stuff, it can truly be appreciated when you were there to see it. But there was, in terms of the technical aspect of it, I asked him to do his work, because a lot of people get really scared when you ask them to take a picture of them, right? So I said, just do your work, and I'll sit here. And I saw that the light was coming from the side, so he's side lit here from this angle. And I waited for the moment, and when he raised his hand, there are lines that connect into this. So I tried to work on my pictures so that you have a beginning point and then kind of an ending point to draw your attention to. This is the central area, so everything pointing towards that. This is, I think it was a 13th generation blacksmith, and they make amazing knives. And he also, this is a Uzbek traditional costume that they wear in Uzbekistan, and they have hats like that. In every region in Uzbekistan, they have hats of different kind. Some of them are smaller profile, larger profile, and also, I saw that he had this area where there were curtains on the side. So I brought him out, and because the inside was a little bit darker, the difference in exposure allowed me to make that part darker and him part of the highlight. I really love the eyes of this guy. He was a motorcycler. He was riding a motorcycle in that area, and he helped us out with finding a location. And as he was just about to leave, I said, "Can I take your photo?" And one of the things I really love doing with my camera is getting really close to the person. And makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but that's why, remember the interpersonal skills, right? You learn how to communicate with people and make them feel comfortable. So I told him, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it, and showed him the images. He saw the images, but his eyes are so piercing. It's almost like, you ignore everything else. Like he's wearing some really old clothes, and none of that stuff is important because this is the highlight. And his eyes kind of, and he's a young guy. He's younger than me, and in villages, they have, it was interesting, as we started talking, but people age differently in different places. This is captured on a drone, and this is, the lake actually has a brilliant color. And this time of the year when we got there was still snow, and these are, believe it or not, when the Soviet Union, when the Soviets decide on how they're going to separate the different republics, in Uzbekistan they literally just looked at the map and looked at wherever the tallest mountains start, and that's what they labeled as the border. So if you climb this mountain and get right there in the border of that, you'll be in Kazakhstan. And as a result, we didn't inherit any mountains. So like the mountain ratio in Uzbekistan is very limited. And this is a place where it's kind of a long hike, and I'm actually standing right there with my drone, and I did a panorama capturing a number of images so that I could do a wide image in a single shot. This is in Samarkand, and when I was photographing, and it's all gold. This is all gold layers, and it's a really, really beautiful location. If you guys have a chance to come to Samarkand, Samarkand is one of the oldest cities in Central Asia. It's part of the Silk Route, and this place is called Aksaray, and it was built a long time ago. And then when they restored it to the original colors. But this angle, it's like a dragon looking at you, right? And these are just shapes. There's a dome in here, and I mean these just look like eyes. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, well that's like a nose, it's like an eyes. Really, really enjoyed it. But it's Islamic art. In Uzbekistan, a lot of the Islamic art is very similar to the Iranian art because that's where a lot of the inspiration came from. Iranian artists would travel, and they would use those guys to do the work. And you can see passages from the Quran, and they're all over here. Really, really beautiful. The detail there is just absolutely stunning. I wish I could show you this in full resolution. This is downscaled to 720p, but if you really look at the details, it's incredible amount of work and detail that went into it. So this is the Aral Sea and what's remaining of it. And it used to be called the Aral Sea, but nowadays it's smaller than a small lake. And the reason why is because it pushes back 60 meters a year. And if you look at the map, you can actually look at the map before and after the crisis. The reason why this happened was because when the Soviet Union decided that Uzbekistan is going to become a cotton country, they diverted the two main rivers for agriculture purposes. And those two main rivers, they come from the mountains of China. They're called Sirdarya and Amudarya, and they used to flow into the Aral Sea. And the Aral Sea by itself is a shallow sea. And as the water stopped flowing into the Aral Sea, it started drying up. And unfortunately, it's recognized as one of the biggest environmental disasters in modern history. And you can imagine standing here as I was standing taking this picture, just imagining that the water was covering this top area. And this is so far away. I flew my drone to get closer to it, and it was over 2 kilometers. Almost at the range of my drone to be able to just be in the shore. That's how far away the place is now. And if you look at the map, the latest map on Google Maps, you'll see that it's just a tiny sliver of it left, which used to be a major sea. This is that other picture with the smartphone that I showed you, except this is taken with my medium format camera. And I really love this structure. In fact, one of the things that I love doing when I do landscape photography is going out and just walking and planning my shot. And the thing is, normally I like to go to a location, scout it beforehand, kind of have an idea of what I want to shoot, and then come back to it with good light. This morning we didn't have that opportunity because we had to drive for like miles and miles and miles. And in my car, so I'll tell you a funny story. In my car, I have 2 Americans with me. And one is a Californian, one is originally from Oklahoma, living in Washington State. But they're very typical Americans in many ways, okay? And as we're driving, the driver, and you can imagine, if you look at Uzbekistan map, it looks like the shape is kind of like this. And on the very top is where Aral Sea is. And that place is like a no man's land. There are parts of this place that nobody has ever been to. There's no phone network, there are no houses nearby, it's literally in the middle of nowhere. And as we were going now, the tourism board is sponsoring us to go and take pictures, right? As we're going to this location, it was like 4 or 5 hours of driving in this, it was the worst road that I've ever been in. It's just absolutely crazy. As we're coming back, this guy tells us stories of all the people who have died in that place. And at some point, I was interpreting, right? I'm telling American, so he's telling me the story in Russian. I'm interpreting from Russian to English, and at some point I realize I need to stop. Because we are in the middle of nowhere, we're out of gas, right? There's almost no gas. And he's like, yeah, earlier this year there was a bus full of people. There were like 30 people in the bus. They all died. I'm like, okay. And they were coming, and it was winter, and their engine broke down, and no cars passed in that area for months. They all froze to death. And okay, we're not driving in the cold. It was springtime, but I was just imagining. And then he tells a story about this American couple that decided to rent a car and drive to the Aral Sea by themselves, and how they died because there was no water. So anyway, and as we're driving, I keep looking at his gas thing, and it's showing empty. And I'm looking in front of me, and there's nothing to be seen, nothing. And I'm starting to panic at this point, because I'm thinking, okay, we only have one single car. There's no satellite phone. Nobody has my American friends, later I told them the story after this, right? They were like, man, I wish I knew, because I would have brought my satellite phone. There was no way to connect with anyone. If that car broke down where we were driving, we would have to sit and hope and beg that somebody is going to drive on that road. And most likely, it would have been the guys on the bus or the American couple that died right before us. So anyway, it was kind of scary, right? But just imagine, with the sea not being there, just to be able to get to that water that I showed you in the previous picture, it was hours and hours of driving on what used to be the bed of the sea. It was crazy. These are people from Karakum, Pakistan. This is Uzbekistan is one of the very few countries that has another country inside it. Okay, so country's name is Karakum, Pakistan, and it's an autonomous republic within a republic. And they look, if you notice the way I look and the way they look more, like people from Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. They're actually different, ethnically different kind of people, and they wear these national dresses, and they're part of a music band. And I came out to photograph. Do they speak Russian? They speak Karakalpak, which is their own native language. And then because they're part of Uzbekistan, they also now learn Uzbek. So they speak primarily Karakalpak and Uzbek. But back in the Soviet days, a lot of people would get Russian education. So they would speak Russian, Uzbek, Karakalpak. I speak 4 languages, but I don't speak Karakalpak. So when I was talking to them, it was rough, because I would talk in Russian, and they would go, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, and I'm thinking, okay, they understand me, and then I'm telling them to do something, and they have no clue. I'm like, okay, there's some disconnect happening here. So I had to ask them, and it turns out that they spoke Uzbek, so I switched to another language, and it was much easier. But yeah, it's... I'm sorry?
Can you repeat the name of the country?
Karakal, Pakistan. Yeah. But, so imagine Pakistan. So it has the same Pakistan part. Karakal before that. And Kara means black, and Kal means Kul. So Kul means like a lake. So Black Lake, Pakistan, I don't know. Anyway, but it was interesting because these guys, they were so scared. They were so scared. I've never seen anyone so scared of the camera. And I had my medium format camera, so like, you know how you start posing people and they have raccoon eyes, like, you know, giant eyes. They were standing like that and shaking. I said, just relax, it's okay. You know, I had to talk to them, and it was amazing. But this is one of the images that came out. This is in Khiva. It's an ancient city. And they are known for their dancing and their singing. They're very creative people. And you know, the women, that's an accordion, which is really strange because that's not an Uzbek instrument, but it came from the European and Russian influence to Uzbekistan. So they adopted it, and that's what they play as instruments. And this is the way that they dress, have feather, and that's their national dress.
Are they Kurdish?
Hmm?
Are they Kurdish?
Kurdish?
Yeah.
No. Do they look Kurdish?
Yeah, the costume looks like.
Interesting. Okay. Well, you know, it's interesting, but like these lines, this is silk. Remember that first picture that I showed with the lady making silk stuff? So they make costumes like that, and that's what they wear. This guy was part of an act, and as soon as he was done, you know, I approached him and I said, "Can I take your photo?" And the same thing, you know, you start posing people, and you know, the first thing that person does, "Can I take your photo?" Sure. And they stand like this, like a soldier, and with a giant eyes looking at you. So like being able to pose them, I told him to drop his shoulder a little bit, you know, and then with the eyes, you know, one trick that always helps is basically if you want the person to not have the raccoon eyes in your photos, right? Just having them squint just a little bit, and push their chin forward a little bit. That defines that chin line, and that's what I had him do. He was very uncomfortable, but you know, it only took a couple of photos. This is also in Khiva, and this is another performer, and I basically, this is one of the walls, and she's standing in between like a fort, and when she stood, I asked her to stand there. I placed her like that, and I asked her to raise her hand, so there's like a little bit of a movement happening here, like triangular shape. I really like triangular shapes in my photography. This is another local that I photographed, also very similar way. She was just walking around, and I said, you know, there was light coming from the sun from behind me, and you know, I said, can you just stand like this? And I positioned her up, and she got a little bit of fill on this side from the wall where the light was bouncing. This is another performer, also from the same region. He also was kind of intense. This was an image of the moon, and this. It's impossible to take something like this in a single shot unless it's happening at the blue hour. And I was kind of lucky, so it was happening at the blue hour. Photographed the moon together with the part of the castle. And I had to wait for a moment and move around a lot to align the moon right on top of the minaret, but it worked out really well. This is also part of that ancient city, and just photographed the sunrise. This is another view. So this is the same minaret, but from another angle. And this was at, I think it was sunset that we did. As you can see, there's a lot of Islamic architecture. These are all Islamic schools. And Uzbekistan was very well known. As you know, we have, yes? Oh, okay. Need to finish up a view of it. And we have more of that same view. Very ancient city. And she's just sitting there doing her work. Asked her to photograph her. This is a beautiful minaret, and they lit it up at night so that the light is bouncing up, and it was happening right at the time of sunset. So I had to, this is one of those shots that I had to take a bunch of images and then subtract the people out because there were lots of people in the foreground. So it took a little bit of effort to do. And then, different types of mosaics that are happening. This is in Samarkand, that ancient city. It's one of the oldest cities in Central Asia. And these are different tombs of very well-known people. A lot of Islamic scholars, actually, one of the Islamic scholars, very well-known figures, is buried there. This is Registan Plaza in Samarkand, and you can come there and see it yourself. There's a little bit of construction taking place at the time. This is a performer in Samarkand, which once they were done with their performance, I asked to photograph her. This was photographed actually at like 10 o'clock at night. It's just the illumination from the lights from the performance were still there, so I positioned her against that, and a little bit of cash lights in her eyes there. This is the tomb of Amir Timur, one of the great conquerors. You know, after Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan, the third one that never lost a battle, it was Tamerlane, and that's his tomb right there. And as Uzbekistan, these are the last couple of pictures that are left. Uzbekistan inherited a lot of, unfortunately, the Soviet culture, fortunately and unfortunately, because there are positive and negative aspects of it. The negative aspect being politically, we weren't doing well for many years. That's why a lot of people aren't aware of what Uzbekistan is. But this is was built in the Soviet time, and this is Yuri Gagarin. You guys know who Yuri Gagarin is, hopefully, first man in space. And that's basically an illustration. This is inside a metro station in Tashkent, the capital. And this is how it looks. So if you go there and you want to see some Soviet Union, this is your chance to do it. This hasn't changed for many years. And they continue to maintain it, and it's incredible. Uzbekistan has one of the most beautiful metro stations in the world. So if you come there, this is another metro station, and this is the last one showing also the metro station. All right, that's about it, guys. Thank you.
We need a trip there.
Yes, absolutely. Please come. This is something I really wanted to do this because I want people to know more about Uzbekistan. It's truly an amazing country. You know, people here,
Far from Dubai, 3 hours from Dubai.
see, it's easy. And right now, it's easy for you guys to get in. It's like they opened up visas for like 120 countries or something, like some crazy number of countries where you can just apply online and go there. It is the cheapest country in the world right now. Cheapest country. Food is cheap. Everything is cheap. So if you have a chance to go, please do. Q&A. Yes, let's do it. All right. Come on, guys. Yes. Be active and don't be scared. I don't bite. Unless you want me to.
Question.
Yes.
Regarding the social media, you were saying that we have to do our own marketing and be more socialized. We used to be behind the camera, not in front of the camera. This is the most obstacle that I see, at least
Yes.
for someone in my age. And this is something we're not used to. And the main reason that I'm not being able to do that, it's not because, as you said, that we are wrong. No, it's not we are wrong. It's not something we're not used to, because I'm not used to go to every single day and post 10 stories saying something is not useful just because I have to be socialized.
Right.
This is something is really infecting my profile. Let's say only on Instagram. I'm not saying anything instead of Instagram.
Right.
Okay, I can post photos, like 100 photos. It's okay, but the main problem is with the stories itself. I'm not being able to make one more step to say that, okay, let's go. Today I'm going to shoot blah blah blah. I'm not being able to do
Right.
that.
Right.
So, is there any kind of solution for this problem? It's something psychology, by the way. It's not something to have a real solution for this. I'm really thinking day after day, what kind of solutions can we as a photographer do if, for example, I don't want to be in front of the camera?
Right, right. That's a very good question. Thank you. I would say it's, and I get a similar question like that from a lot of people when talking about this. It's a very difficult thing for many photographers, I can tell you that. And a lot of people struggle with that, especially initially as you're starting, right? Trying to do that, trying to be your brand and the face of the company can become difficult. One thing, and it's not always a good solution, but if you are big enough to be able to hire someone to do it for you, that can be a solution. But if you're not willing to do it yourself, you need to see what else you can do. Maybe it's not Instagram stories. Maybe it's something else. Maybe you push out more work. Maybe you do more advertising spending. You know, one of the things, for example, I'll give you a very quick thing. If you spend $10 on very targeted advertising and $11 come back your way, is it worth spending the money? So why aren't you doing it? As an example. Okay. So, right. And okay, so if you're talking only about you being the face of the brand and you don't want to put your face out there, so your main reason for that is just you're not used to doing it, you just don't like doing it. Okay, that's fine. Yes, that's fine. And I think, you know what, at the end of the day, today it's Instagram stories, tomorrow it might be something else. If you're putting content, high quality content on a frequent basis, you're already doing more than what most of your competitors are doing. You know, for me, for example, I don't really use social media all that much. You know, I don't have a giant following on Instagram. You know, we have like some following on Facebook, but I stopped looking at Facebook ever since they started making you pay for it. The thing is, for every brand, for every market, things can be different. Are you like a family photographer? What type of photography do you do? Fashion? Okay. So in your world, I would say it is important, you know, to be the face of the brand. So if you don't want to do it yourself, maybe you can have somebody else do it for you. But the thing is, you don't do it, somebody else will, and that somebody else will do better than you just because of that. So if you... Can you repeat that again?
Maybe in this case, I have another solution, which is making more relationship and communication between real people instead of having
See,
someone,
that hits
virtual.
home for me. I really wish the stuff that we're dealing with today didn't exist. Like deep in the bottom of my heart, I hate Facebook. I'm open to admit it. I hate Instagram and everything that comes with it. The problem with that is what I showed you before. All the money is going there.
Yeah.
All the advertising is going there. In fashion industry, all your competitor, all the companies that want to do fashion, they're spending the money on those platforms. You know, lipstick, if I'm a company and I want to sell lipstick, do you think I'm going to go to Google? I'm going to go to Facebook and say, give me all the females that are between this and this age in this region. Done. I'll get more money from that than anything else combined. The thing is, whoever gathers the most amount of data today is the one who other companies are going to use to sell their services or products. And whether we like it or not, with me hating Facebook and Instagram, as much as I want to hate them, the facts are the numbers. And there's nothing you can do against that. So if you want to survive in that niche of a market, you only have one way. And I hate to say this, but I hate to admit it, but this is the way that the business is flowing. If everybody is on Instagram, you guys in this room, you saw it. Your clientele is potentially sitting in this room and they're using Instagram. So if you're not on it, or if you refuse to use part of their services, if you're not doing what everybody else is doing, somebody else will. And the thing is, for me, it's also a difficult thing. Because if I need to build my brand from nothing, and now I have to expose my face every day and think about, you know, I'm going to talk about, I can tell you other people who are doing it, they're already successful. I'm already getting late into the game. So it's either you adapting and changing to what the market demands, or you're out. That's just the way it is. Marketing is switching. It's all about marketing. It's all about how you sell today. Nothing else is as important. You could be an amazing fashion photographer. You could be an amazing photographer, period. Better than everybody else of all your competition. But if you're not doing this, you're going to lose in the long term. I can guarantee you that. Because that's where the money is, unfortunately. So my answer to you is, I think you need to open up a little bit. Experiment with it at least. See how it works out. The thing is, a lot of people can be personable. And I think this is where people lose it. People think, I need to do this and talk about how amazing I am. No. You need to put out content giving something to people. Remember jab, 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 right? Gary's stuff. Why does he talk about that? So you give out free content, you make it valuable, you make your channel valuable. And what happens is people are going to start getting glued all of a sudden. They're like, you know what, that channel gives like 75%. Well, they're not going to say 75%, but they're going to say it's mostly free stuff and it's valuable. Like you do fashion photography, you could talk about how, you know, a lot of effort went into, you know, doing makeup. You show the process of how to photograph this. You give it out to all those other photographers, they become your fans. And all of a sudden now you have an audience. And that audience, once there's people, you guys look at the Instagram accounts, right? I mean, you guys can admit it. When you look at someone else's work and they have 5 followers and they have 5 million followers, which one are you going to look at more? It's obvious, right? If someone is doing something right, you're going to follow them. This is the way things are today. And this is the way that the market demands it. And it's adapt or die. That's just the way it is. That's the way I personally see it. Very unfortunate because for me, at the end of the day, they're not good guys. Facebook has shown its real face. A couple years back, Mark Zuckerberg had to sit in front of the court, you know, and answer all the questions about how they're doing all the data and they're selling information, right? You know how things influenced American voting for the presidential candidates and all the stuff, dirty work that went to it. It's not a good company. I hate them. They give out everything. And they sell your information left and right. But people are willingly giving them that. That's why nobody can tackle them. You know, when you sign up for a Facebook account, you gave them your real name. You gave them your marital status. You gave them all the friends. You were the one who did it. And now if we're wondering why is this happening to us and the world is collapsing, we are part of the problem. So at this point, you either think, okay, I have to adapt and do something about it, or I'm going to be out of the business. This is how things are. And it's very unfortunate. Any other questions? Hope that answers your question. Yes?
When is your next workshop that we can join?
So I try to balance my life with my workshops, and I do a very limited number. So I have my next workshop is going to be in September in Colorado, the fall colors that I showed you. So that's the one that I do. Another one is going to be in Death Valley, most likely. And then hopefully Dubai, Jordan. You know, that's we have now. Yeah, right after this, I'm going to have my guys coming in. So we are going to drive and travel in Dubai, do photography. And then from there, we're going to fly into Jordan, do photography there. And then from there, part of us are going to split up and go to Turkey.
So you don't have any followers on Facebook, but you have any followers?
No, I have like 300,000 followers on Facebook, but I don't cater to that audience.
Photography life. You have any?
Right. In terms of overall, so overall, my reach on a monthly basis is roughly between 2.5 to 3 million per month in terms of visitors. So it's one of the top photography blogs on the internet today. And part of that is, again, like I said, my formula for everything that I've done so far has been about giving. Like, if you ask me any question today, I don't care what it is. Nassim, how did you post-process that image? I will tell you step by step everything that I've done. We are no longer living in the time when I have secret photography tips that I keep to myself. If you do that, you're a dying breed. You will be no more. And the reason for that is because people are embracing honesty, integrity, basic human traits. In the virtual world, you want to find people who are decent, because you know that most of that virtual world is not. So when you find someone who you like, who you appreciate, you are going to become that customer. How are these people drawing it? In that specific way. Yes? Wait, yeah.
We needed to follow the third of rule and composition. I see some pictures. Third of rule different, yeah?
Okay. I give out the yeah, no problem. So your specific question was you follow the rule of thirds and you didn't really see it in my photos, right? Okay. So I don't do rule of thirds. I think it's a bogus, made up, stupid thing. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. When I say this, I know, and I was actually in a photography school with 100 people in front of me, and there were professors sitting in the room when I said this. They, like, one of the guys stood up and he was angry. And he was like, we teach this to our students, how could you say that? Seriously, like, what is a rule of thirds? Some guy or whoever decided that, like, if you divide it to equal 9 parts, and if you put your subject to that place. Have you guys seen a photo by Ansel Adams? It's called the Moon of Hernandez. Yeah? Yeah? Where is that moon? It's not in the middle. It's a little bit left to the middle. I stood and looked at that picture and I'm thinking, what is wrong with this composition? You know, back in the day, because I was thinking how this, it was one of the most successful photographs of Ansel Adams. And when somebody told him that, he said, how could they like this picture? I have so many more amazing images. He himself wasn't happy about that being his, like, most popular picture. And yet that picture doesn't follow any rules whatsoever. The thing is, and this is where we as photographers also make mistakes. Somebody tells you somewhere, whether it's your photography school or whatever, that you have these rules that you have to abide by. For me, you know, center composition, there's nothing wrong with center composition. In fact, you know, okay, I'll tell you a couple of stories. One story, this was a lady that came to my workshop a couple of years back. And we were talking about photography clubs. Are you guys part of photography? Obviously, you're part of HIPAA, but any other photography clubs? Like, you know, you go where they judge your photos and stuff? Okay, so she told me that she left her photo club, and I said, why? She said, you know, Nassim, after a while, everybody's photos started looking the same. You know why? Because the judges that judge those photos, they see a subject in the center and they say, you know, if you pushed it to the left to make it for a rule of thirds, it would be an amazing picture. Next time, that person is not shooting that subject anymore. He's thinking about rule of thirds. Right? And everybody's pictures, because the judges, who are judges? Like some guy who shot for 30 years and, you know, he can say, oh yeah, I'm a 30-year veteran photographer, and that makes him amazing? Like, for today, we don't live in that world today anymore. The authority of a person is not the same authority that used to be back in the day. I can tell you, today, I'm recognized as one of the experts in photography. How am I an expert if I didn't go to photography school? But I never did. I have a business background. I graduated from University of Colorado with a management and marketing degree. I have nothing to do with photography. And yet, I am because I learned it. You know, when Elon Musk was asked, how did you participate in every part of that rocket? He said, I read every book on rocketry I could find. He's an expert in rocketry now. So the authority that we had back in the day, where somebody is a veteran photographer, no more. The authority today is whoever is successful. That person has more authority. It's unfortunate for many industries that are part of education because it's erasing the meaning of education, right? Because you spend 4+ years in school studying something for some young guy to come out and erase that. But this is a fact of life. This is something we're dealing with today. So yeah, rules are rules, but they are not there to establish something. It's meaningless. When I was taking a picture of this lady, I didn't think about rule of thirds, positioning, nothing. I looked at the light, it was coming and hitting her face. That's all I saw, and I waited for the moment and I took some pictures. None of that other stuff is important. And okay, I ask this question every single time from all the audiences. I'd like to hear this. Have you guys heard of the golden rule? The golden ratio? Yeah, everybody knows the golden ratio. Okay, you don't have to admit it of shame or anything like that. I don't care. Nobody else in this room hopefully cares. Have you ever taken a photo? This is the question. With a golden ratio in mind before you took the photo? Admit it. Has anyone in this room taken a photo with a golden ratio in mind before they took the photo? Nobody. I can tell you one thing. Golden ratio is a bunch of BS. That's it. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because whoever did this whole, you know, they even did Trump's ear with the golden ratio. Yeah? Have you guys seen that picture? It's amazing. I wish I... Okay, anyway. The whole idea of the golden ratio being perfect and all that, every photograph that you will see that showcases the golden ratio, whoever did that, they cropped it afterwards to match it. Every single example on the internet you will find is like that. And all of a sudden it becomes a magic formula. They even talked about, there is an hour-long, and I all encourage you, everyone here, to do that. Go on YouTube. There is a golden ratio and rule of thirds lecture by a Harvard professor of photography. Listen to it. He debunks the whole golden ratio thing. It doesn't exist. So, go into rules. Yeah. Sorry, if I look at the reaction here, I know I can get in trouble for this kind of stuff. Okay.
Can we get the presentation?
I'm sorry?
Can we have your presentation?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Can you guys post it on whatever your internal resources? Okay. Excellent.
Okay, everyone, this was really amazing lecture. Thank you. Let's go all to the reception. We will take a group photo, then you take your certificates. And good night.
Wow, they give you certificates for this. Man, that's some serious stuff.
There will be people asking for your signatures. Come with me.
All right, all right. Let me just put this away. Yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for coming.
Come with us.
Oh, yeah.
No selfies here.
Yeah, please.